Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the program. I am your host, Chris George Zuger, and you have entered the Den of Lore. Pull your chair up to the fire, grab yourselves a glass of scotch, because we're going to learn some cool shit tonight, courtesy of some returning guests, whom you all know and love. Bruce R. Fenton and Daniella Fenton are joining us in the den today to answer the question. Are ancient aliens confirmed? And you know, I can't wait to find out. First thing that I need to get out of the way is to thank every single person who is listening in at home for joining us on this program this afternoon, and to give a fantastic thank you to our lovely patrons who ensure that we can say whatever the fuck we want on this channel, on this show, and to continue on being 100% listener supported without taking any corporate sponsorship or having annoying commercials that break up the conversation. And if you want to support the program and support Den of Lore, because we are expanding, we are very close to our $750 goal to opening up our Saturdays with the Promethean Report, which will be hosted by Bram. And this would not be possible without the donations of our patrons that do support the show currently. And I want to give a shout out to them, and starting first with our illustrious masters, Jackie from across the pond and Pat from Brooklyn. And a special thank you goes out to our masters, Jenny, Dobromir Raynov, Lee Veltman, Chuck Schwartz, Jared Thompson, Mrs. Fox, Roses, Joshua E. Maddock, and our den mother, Ellen McCurdy. And to the rest of our patrons, starting with Mark Catalano, Eric J. Ferguson, Martin Hackinson, Photopic, Nick Z. Correa Yurt, Charles Davis, Thiago Bauer, Michael Eckhoff, Dean John Kenward, Anthony Derry, Atlantic Couche, Venice, Christopher Moody, Robin Webley, Hobby, and Mike Rice. Thank you very much for believing in us and believing in the program, and for wanting to see us grow. And that being said, let me get the main camera on here and welcome into the den our guest for tonight. And I believe I'm getting some echo on your side.
I don't know. Is it getting a bit echo there?
I can hear myself doubly on your side, actually. Just want to make sure.
That's a bit weird.
We're not hearing it.
No.
You're not? Where's the
no.
No.
One second here. Let me turn that down. And we're good, I believe. Let me turn that. There we go. The one benefit to not having a producer is, I can actually access the mixing board right here.
Sure. Yeah, you can control it. Yeah.
Again, I wanted to thank you very much for joining us. I know you've been very patient, as we all know. The running joke with this program is it never starts on time, but we always have a rip-roaring, fantastic time beforehand, and we get to spend some time. And I can't come down there to visit you myself, and I feel bad about that, because, Bruce, you're probably one of the coolest people I know, and you've been such a good sport, and now we get to spend some time also with you and your lovely wife, whom you two have written a book, which is out very, very, very soon.
And 2 weeks.
2 weeks, and it will be available at hybridhumans.net. It is Hybrid Humans, and I just want to make sure I get the full title correctly on this. Hybrid Humans, the scientific evidence of our 8,000-year-old alien... 800... Damn it. 800,000-year-old alien legacy. And Bruce, the last time you were on the show, you had dropped some hints that you had some groundbreaking, revelatory news on the ancient alien field, or as a field of study, as it were. And you being a researcher who is very highly regarded, your last book had it forward by none other than Graham Hancock, who is a personal hero of mine. And you don't get that kind of accolades or that kind of support if you don't have some good research chops behind you. And I know when you mentioned this, that, well, I said, okay, he probably has something that isn't bullshit. I'm guessing there's no reptilian aliens that are mining monoatomic gold in rocket ships that are coming down here to have sex with apes. Maybe they did. I don't know.
Well,
but
I'm not going to say that there's none of that sort of stuff, but it would be a bit better supported than perhaps, and perhaps not quite as, I don't know, not as much made up sounding, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess. We'll see. We'll see what people think.
Well,
but yeah, I would hesitate to say that there's nothing as strange as that in there. There's still some pretty weird stuff.
And I'm just also, again, if you're listening at home, if you're listening on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on Spreaker, right now we are live on audio on the app as well as on Spreaker.com/show/Den of Lore. And if you're on Twitch, what Periscope, it doesn't matter. Facebook, just hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and join us the next time. Now, Daniella, we know Bruce. We know him pretty well. We got a pretty colorful, explanative laden show from him the last time, which was absolutely fantastic. With you in the room, I know we have to be a little more proper. So again, please do forgive anything that tends to slip out. It's what we do here.
That's okay.
Now, tell us a little bit about yourself, because you are actually a medium, and while we were prepping for the show, you were finding some very interesting things around the room here that kind of freak me out and make me afraid to be doing this show, because apparently my dead next-door neighbor, God rest her soul, who actually tried to kill Coco the first day we moved in here, with a rake, no less, she died about a year ago, and apparently she's snooping on me now.
Yeah. It seems to be that way. Yeah.
Is she like
As
right,
we were prepping.
she like right there?
Well, she was a bit further back, sort of towards the curtain where the light comes in from behind the curtain, and I saw her silhouette, and she was just moving around listening to you as we were prepping for the show, and very clearly got an image of, what she would have physically looked like, and she was just sort of hanging around. So that was quite interesting.
She means you no harm.
No, she doesn't. Absolutely not. And she's quite different now. I felt that her energy was very different to what it would have been when she was alive.
While you were saying that, I actually had a chill up my neck, like somebody was doing, that, and it's. Yeah. Oh God! It's cold in here now. Actually.
Yeah.
I think she just likes to know that she's there. That's all.
Well,
yeah.
Well, now at least I know that I've got somebody who can wake me up when I fall asleep at my desk.
You should put her to work. Ask her to do some tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's just there, and you can ask her to help you out and sort of look after the place, watch after you guys, and
Can you graphic design? No. I'll teach you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And
she doesn't need money.
No, you don't need a wage. They just need acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you been a medium? Well, are you?
Oof. Well, all this strange stuff, I guess, all this phenomenon and
childhood. Well,
since I can remember, basically, since I was little. I mean, I have recollections of, being in my cot and sort of seeing things and having out of body experiences and astral travel and flying around the room. And I remember looking down and still being in a nappy. So I mean, this has been happening all my life. It's not been something that has sort of just started suddenly. It's always been there. So
you specialised more in mediumship recently, haven't you?
Recently, yes. I was doing more psychic work, doing readings, and also went into shamanism that I picked up in Ecuador while we were living in South America. And prior to that, I was doing a horse brokerage business from Spain. So quite a diverse person with my work.
Diversity is the spice of life, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, for your horse brokerage, that's a field of study that I actually know existed. I do have some equestrian friends, and one of my cousins has been a rider since she was a teenager. So, if anybody who has the ability to do that and can commune and just can relate to these magnificent animals and knows how they feel and actually do have the emotions of most humans that most people may not recognize that. It's you're probably very good at it, especially if you have very strong empathic abilities.
Yeah.
I found that helped. I found that was part of what drove me to get closer to this in a professional level, because it used to be my hobby as a child. I was riding since about 7 years old, and I always wanted to be around horses. I always wanted to work with horses. I wanted to be a vet originally, but so many changes in my life and traveling with my parents and coming and going from Australia, South America, and just moving around quite a bit didn't allow that to happen. So when I finally went to Spain in 2004, I thought, well, it's a very like horse orientated country, especially where I was living in the south in Andalusia. And I thought, well, what can I do here? So I sort of looked into it and sort of got into it that way. So I started my own brokerage. I started my own websites. You made contacts with people there, Spanish horses, Lusitano horses. And then the passion came for the Frisians from Holland, and that's where I sort of hit the hardest. Yeah. And I mean, yes.
And how did it seems like a very interesting jump going from, let's say, horse brokering Frisians to being a medium to writing about ancient aliens, especially with somebody who is your husband, who is also considered, the up and coming alternative, or I'm not going to say alternative because I know that's a bad word now. The
non-academic or independent
researchers on the planet right now.
And I moan about
the word alternative. Yeah, I mean, sort of connecting with Bruce and meeting Bruce, and then physically, because we met online many, many years ago, but we hadn't actually met physically. And when we finally did in 2012, that's when everything just went bang, because I don't know if it was like a cosmic plan. I guess it was. I put it down to that, or Bruce's fault. Yeah. But us coming together just made that explode, because it totally took me in a different path. And it sort of brought out that inner part of me that was sort of lying a little bit dormant with the mediumship, and then sort of getting into the shamanism, and then getting into the book writing, because it wasn't the book writing is not my strong point, I guess, and I'm quite a shy person by nature. So Bruce sort of like prompted me.
I probably nudge you
a bit. A lot, because of all the things that have happened. Just so many to mention. We could be here all day.
And I suppose, like you said, with the jump was in 2012 where we sort of physically met, and then it was very early in 2012 that Danny started having experiences that specifically involved what seemed to be ET, isn't it? That's fair to say. That's where the jump was. I guess it's between the phenomena of mediumship, psychic stuff, but then it took on
a really weird
tone which involved what seemed to be ET. That's just to sort of, not to take over there, but that's where I see that changing.
Now, are we talking, again, for anybody out there who has heard me rag on UFOs, ufologists, UFOtainment, it's not. I do not have a belief in ET or a lack of belief in UFOs. I've seen UFOs myself. I definitely do believe in the possibility of aliens. I do believe they may be visiting. I do believe that people may be getting abducted. I just don't believe that there, are underground bases that are communing with blue chickens and talk to a guy who's a time-traveling space marine. I make that joke every single episode. It's for a reason. To be able to demonstrate bullshit.
People shouldn't just believe without evidence, should they? I think that goes for any subject.
And that's the thing. So Dan, you've had experiences. Can you at least describe the nature? Is it is it
my first real ET contact happened when I was with my dad back just before 2000. It was probably 1999 roughly. We were driving pretty close to Sydney Airport, and our airport in Sydney is on the bay, Botany Bay, and the runway goes out into the ocean, into the water. And so we were about, I guess, just several hundred meters about to cross the airport tunnel, which you have to drive under and come out on the other side, and you continue your route. So the planes sort of fly over you. When there was a sort of traffic jam, and it was really strange because people were getting out of the cars. We actually thought that there was an accident, and we're talking about 3 or 4 lanes going one way, 3 or 4 lanes going the other way, and all the cars had stopped on both sides. We thought, this is weird. So, pretty much did what everyone else was doing. sort of stopped the car, had a look, got out, and there were these 3 lights on top of the control tower, and they were in a shape of a triangle, like they were forming a triangle. So the one there and then 2 down here. I was like, Dad, you've got to see this. So he got out and he looked up and he's like, what the hell is that? I said, do you think, could it be? He's like, get back in the car. He was like, straight away, get back in the car. But everybody was out. The police eventually came and started moving the cars along. And we noticed that one of these things just went and it took off so quickly we couldn't see where it went. Like in a millisecond, it was gone. Then the other one was gone in another direction. And there was just one left hovering on top of the airport. Well, the traffic began moving. Police sort of cleared everyone out because nobody wanted to move. We're all just looking. So we're driving along and we noticed that this one light that looked to us when I looked up properly, it looked like a triangle, was just sort of flying on top of our car. It followed us for a good 15 minutes until we lost it basically in a road that's covered by trees. So it's sort of in that kind of shape. But the whole time, every time we took a turn, this thing was on top of us. And my dad eventually said to me, this has got to be something that I've seen before as a child. My dad grew up in Ecuador in the jungle, and he used to see this kind of thing all the time. And I was keen to get out of the car. I was trying to sit, with my body half hanging out, trying to see this thing. And he was like, just don't. And the car was sort of acting up. We were trying to listen to music at the same time. Radio wasn't working. The car was it was going to fail. It was going to stop.
Oh, man.
And my dad I was the one that actually started to get scared because my dad started panicking. And I said, go up this road because it's covered with trees, and whatever it is, it will just have to go because there's no way it can physically come down on us. And that's what we did. But it followed us for a good 15 minutes. And that experience, it was wow, I mean, there's nothing like that being followed physically by a craft that you cannot describe. No sound, no birds, no nothing. It was just, and it sounded sort of a bit like a vacuum, but it was very low. It was like a humming sound. And we're talking about a time of the year, it would have been close to summer. I don't remember the exact month, but it wasn't cold, it wasn't hot. So we had the windows down. I remember when we stopped the car, you couldn't hear a single thing. There was nothing. It was everything was dead. There was no noise. And then eventually it went. But every time we took a turn, this thing was right over our car. And I was flipping out. And my dad was just don't get out of the car because I've seen this. I've been followed by these things. Since he was 15 years old, he has seen this over and over again. And that was my first experience with them.
Now, I know that there are some people who claim that the phenomena for abductions is hereditary. So, that they'll say okay, well, my mother had experiences and I had experiences, and, essentially they follow, they're supposed to follow a family line. At least this is something that my mother has told me. And I know her and I have discussed it a lot. And it's, I've seen UFOs since I was a kid. My mom's seen quite a few, but she always says it's we see them because they're just around and we pay attention to this. We look up at the sky. But she's always told me we've never had a history of this in our family. And I'm sitting there going, maybe we have, Mom, and you're just bullshitting me. Help me out here. I never had anything that scary. As far as experiences
before.
It was
pretty full on. I was excited wild. At the same time. Yeah, I was excited, but I was scared. And my dad was just don't get out of the car. It's just don't.
Yeah, and I mean, he told me about another full daylight sighting he had, in the town he's from, called Ambato in Ecuador. And he said, obviously many years ago, decades ago. But he said, that he was in the town centre and that, there was a lot of people. And he said that this craft, more like a saucer-like one, not a triangle, but he said it was just hovering high above the cathedral that was in the centre of the town. And he said, and obviously there was quite a lot of people. They were looking up, and it was just this thing. He said it was just hovering there. So he has had other, I'd say daylight, full, witnessed sightings. So it does seem that there's a family kind of connection.
He doesn't really talk about it much.
No,
he doesn't give it much
emphasis.
emphasis.
He's told me stuff that he hasn't told her. He doesn't like to. I think that they've always been a bit against Danny's sort of intuitive psychic kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
So so there was always a load of rubbish, but then they would secretly say stuff like, "Oh yeah, I've had all these things happen." And you're like, "Hang on," but you're always saying that she's full of crap, And then when they're sitting talking to me, it's like, "Oh no, I had this," and like, well, that's not very fair.
No, it's not. They don't. Let me just say, they don't encourage it. They don't like to talk about it. It wasn't talked about. And since I was very young, anything that I saw as being strange, like mediumship and, things that I was trying to understand and put the pieces of the puzzle together, it was always frowned upon. Mm-hmm. And my mum was very strict about that kind of stuff. So my dad didn't talk about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, he hardly ever spoke about these things. And it was only that when we had that sighting where I was with my father that he said to me, I've had this several times. Just don't get out of the car because this is freaky enough,
Yeah. And if anyone wonders if she comes from like a hippie new age background, I can only tell you, nowhere near.
Very far from it.
Very far from that, yeah. To the very extreme of more towards the fascist dictatorship than the new age family.
Well, do you mind if I ask what your background is?
Oh, mine. Well, my dad's from Ecuador, so he's got indigenous Ecuadorian and Spanish. Mm-hmm. And my mother, she's Austrian, and her background is German, French, and they've got Romanian. So a bit of a mix there.
Yeah.
Okay.
She grew up. She grew up in Chile, isn't it?
Yeah, she grew up in Chile after the Second World War, and they migrated to South America, and I was born in Australia, and my parents met in Australia.
Well, for anybody who came out of Europe, Australia is always the second choice. I know with a lot of Croatians during the 90s. The 70s, a lot of them went to Canada, and that's why I'm here. Mm-hmm. And during the 90s and the war, a lot of people went to Australia because they're like, well, we had a choice between Canada and Australia. We took the big spiders, mm-hmm. not the snow, because who the fuck wants to deal with that? And the stories that can sometimes come out of more of the remote villages that may not have had, or even like the larger towns that, let's say, had hundreds of thousands of people and not tens upon millions of people, you tend to get a lot more interesting stories out of those because the population's still in a much more condensed space. Usually the individuals. And I'm not going to say it's something that's not a Canadian thing, because like Canadians were pretty friendly. At the same time, we're very nuclear. We don't usually go outside of our bubble. Whereas like in Europe, back in my parents' village, everybody knew everybody. The original Big Brother was your the moms watching outside of the window to see what the kids were doing. They'd go back and tell their mom afterwards and said, "I saw your kid causing shit." And then my dad would come home and then. Well,
there it was. Everybody knew.
Exactly. So there's a certain level of distrust, but at the same time, there's still that level of trust. And if people see things, they're gonna. It holds a little more validity to certain stories, unless you're talking about outside sources. But you're actually a source that's descended from a source that's coming from one of these areas. Yeah. So that holds a much higher regard, or at least a chance of it actually being true. Yeah. Which blows my mind.
And on the other stuff as well. I mean, fortunately, found out her grandmother used to do sort of healings and clearings and things mm-hmm. as well. So on that side as well, I guess the intuitive, psychic kind of side, that there seems to be a history in the family as well. So I guess both the weird experiences and the kind of the energetic stuff, both are in the family mm-hmm. from what we can gather. It does seem there's something with the that thing about bloodlines, and like. How things seem to pass down, and also experiences, or the ability to experience, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Now, for this particular book, or the basis of how it got started, have you always wanted to write the book yourself, or was there something that compelled you to start it?
The journeys pushed you, didn't they? I mean, you should explain those a little bit. I mean,
one experience after the other, and I just said to Bruce, because he had just finished his last book, and I said to him, I think it's time to sort of start talking about this kind of thing, because I feel it's going to start happening more and more and more people are going to start to experience things, and I think we're getting to a time where it felt right. And obviously, Bruce had a lot of research. I had the experiences one after the other.
Just tell a bit about the experiences, because you didn't specifically say about.
No, well, that was the more harrowing one. I had a full year of. I don't even know if it's abduction, if it's time travel, if it's. I don't know what title to put on it.
I guess the closest thing is shamanic journeys of a very strange ET sort, isn't it? I mean,
We had basically left Spain together and migrated to Ecuador in late January 2012, and in pretty much within the week of us.
Yeah, it wasn't long after we got to Ecuador.
Like 4 or 5 days after we got there, we originally arrived at my parents' apartment in Quito, and then we went to Ambato where we were going to stay at our house, and we were drinking one night, as you do in South America, just having a few drinks.
Not getting, smashed.
No, nothing like that. We were having a few drinks. We were just sort of chilling and talking, and I wasn't feeling very well, so I was like, I'm going off to bed. Went to bed, passed out.
You just started feeling worse and worse, and you just started feeling worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, until I passed out.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I thought when she's saying that, I mean, I really thought she was seriously ill. I mean, she looked like she was in a lot of pain.
But it wasn't because I drank
she hadn't had a lot.
Alcohol.
I was like, this is not making sense.
No. Something was off, and eventually, I mean, what I remember, he says, I was having pain.
You look like you're in pain, real pain.
I just remember passing out basically, and the next thing I know that I'm in this location that I don't recognize with strange-looking people in a see-through, no floor dome in this place, and outside the color was a teal color, and they're just having this meeting, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? And I thought I was dreaming, but it felt too real. And then
you did sort of wonder if you were dead, so I didn't know that was the other.
Yeah, I did. I sort of suspected something had happened to me at this point, because to get from where I was to that location, it felt like my body had been torn to pieces, and every single cell had been transported through the wall of the bedroom where I was, and then being in this location, part of a meeting with beings that looked really bizarre and really tall and really weird.
Now, I'm going to ask, just to be able to clarify, coming from a European family who my father's side owned several stills, and my mother's side made very fantastic plum brandy from organic mountain water grown plum trees. Oh my goodness, so fantastic! Are you? What was this store bought or was this family made? Because I know that the effects of really good, pure, clean water alcohol can sometimes be a little different as far as dreams are concerned.
Are you talking about the Slivovica?
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Oh, so okay.
Because my grandfather's Croatian.
oh God! Okay, then you know.
I know. My parents drink that. We weren't drinking that because they don't have that in Ecuador.
No, we just did cheap this fizzy peach. Wasn't it?
It was like
20% kind of, I guess, fortified fizzy wine type thing from the shop. Yeah, nothing special.
Bit of a cooler. It had a bit of a kick to it, but I didn't drink enough to say she's shattered. I don't drink like that.
No. Lemonade, essentially. Okay.
Yeah, and so it was just really uncomfortable. I was feeling really ill. I was feeling uncomfortable. Really but I mean, I remember my take on it is I had the drinks. I went upstairs. I must have been in pain, and then I probably just passed out. Fell asleep. And yeah, the next morning was when the surprise hit me, because apparently I'd been reciting the Hopi prophecy.
Well, she was saying all this stuff, she was mumbling, and I was listening, and I thought, well, some of this sounded kind of familiar, stuff about there being. Two suns.
Three suns.
Was it 3 suns and
3 days of darkness?
Herb changes and but it was all stuff. I could kind of get because of my background in research. I was like, some of this sounds kind of familiar from different texts and prophecies and so I'd note it down as much as I could hear from her mumbling in a sort of unconscious state. And then the next day I asked her. I said, do you remember having any weird dreams or anything? While you were out. And she said, yeah, I do remember, actually. I was at this place and stuff. And I was like, there's a lot of weird stuff here you were saying. And I had a pretty good, record of what she'd said. And I suppose it's a bit mean. It might sound a bit mean, but I kind of tested her a little bit. Just sort of said, what do you remember? I didn't sort of say straight away, look, you said this, you said that, And she explained, obviously, her side of what had happened. Obviously, I can only hear one side of the conversation, as you can imagine. Obviously, I can only hear what she was basically replying to these non-physical, not present beings. So obviously I can only hear what she's replying. But so she explained that she was being asked questions by this group that were in this experience. Obviously she hadn't physically gone anywhere. Obviously her body was there. So it was purely in a altered state of consciousness type experience. But from her perspective, she was being asked, her opinions on this subject of Earth changes. So obviously she then filled in a bit on her side what what they've been saying, and I was like, well, I've got actually written down quite a lot of what you were saying, and that kind of makes sense because I can fill in about what you're saying. They asked you were actually mumbling a lot of this, in the night, and so it kind of was a very strange, full-on kind of experience. But then after that, it started happening, but without any of the cheap alcohol from the shop. So whether that initially had any effect at all, you can't say, but after that it just continued without.
And it was weekly. I mean, it was like 2, 3, 4 times a week. So I mean, suffice to say, I was waking up feeling so tired, and I was, in agony because it was a painful process. It wasn't like going to sleep and having a dream. I do remember literally wrecking my legs, kicking the wall, trying not to be dragged through whatever barrier was taking me to that other place. On one occasion, I ended up in a fight with some beings on the other side, and when I woke up, I had black eyes.
There's a lot of strange
from
stuff.
Being whacked in the face. And I remember my daughter coming into the room thinking that Bruce had done something to me.
And I'd see her head getting twisted. I'd hold her head.
It was awful.
Because it was
awful.
From where she was, she would have a being trying to twist her neck, and I'd literally holding her head, saying are you okay? Come back, sort of thing. Wake up, and stuff like that. And really weird, associated phenomena with it. Writing on the walls with your finger, drawing symbols on the walls while you're unconscious and stuff. And it was quite regularly and strange. Also, I recorded quite a few times when she was speaking in what I believe to be Mayan, which I have, extensive recordings of that. But so she seemed to be speaking in a language she's never spoken before, and the experiences did involve Mayan people. So I mean, it was kind of meshing with that. Very strange.
It's horrible. For me, it was horrible. It was horrible.
Well, this is different than any other. There's a standard that I hear, it felt like I was taken up through the ceiling, and I was on a table, and there was these.
This was through a wall, cell by cell, physically.
And finding herself somewhere else, literally, transported consciousness only. Not. No, there's no way it was her body because I was there. So if she'd been on her own, perhaps she might have thought, I've gone in my body, my body's been took out through the wall, and because you don't have anyone to, to correct you on that, what I mean? But if you've got somebody else in the room, obviously they can say, well, no, your body has been here the whole time, no matter how real it feels that your body had gone and that you're in a body somewhere, I can say, well, no, your body's physically here.
I mean,
which asks questions about some of those people, maybe if they don't have a witness, you haven't experienced something like that, you might think your body has gone, because nobody's there to tell you different.
And you don't know if you're coming back. I mean, having these experiences, living this other life on the other side in 7th century Palenque in Mexico, with Mayans, with hybrids, with everyone. It was a really harrowing experience because it was like I was living a life there, I was living a life here, and I was not resting in between these two locations. And every time this would happen where I would go, I didn't know if I was going to come back. I didn't know if I was going to die, and it was a concern, and it changed me physically. It changed me mentally and spiritually. It was a real test for me. I found it really harrowing. We looked for help. There was. And
we had other things.
Who do you ask about this kind of stuff?
And it wasn't happening in isolation because we had other things that were problematic going on in the day, which I won't go over particularly. But we had other, I guess, spiritual, psychical issues that were going on in that time, plus this, an ongoing disagreement with her parents who were sharing the house with at the time. So it was like a whole stress of phenomena plus day-to-day problems, all condensed. So it was
with black eyes and scratches and, feeling like, I feel like dying because it's just it's too much.
Yeah, it was a bit much.
And getting all this information and Bruce recording and and it was just going on and on. It went on for a good part of a year and probably just over a year. And then suddenly it just stopped. I was like, thank God, because I can't do it. If it happened once or twice or 3 times and I got all this information or download or whatever, fine. But it was weekly, and it was like, you're here now. No, you're over there.
And it didn't seem to always have a point at all. When people would say they're channeling or they're going somewhere to get information, but a lot of the time it didn't really seem to have that kind of point where you'd say, okay, I come back and now I know what they wanted. It was more like, what was the point in that? A lot of the time you couldn't say that there was, overall, yeah, she saw things that you can sort of say, are interesting or important, but not to validate taking, like, say, 50 journeys for, like, no. I mean,
No.
Stuff that if there's somebody had wanted to see stuff, that they could have done it in, like, a couple of days, in a few days. I don't, again, I think, if it is an alien phenomena, it speaks something to the fact that aliens really don't think like us, perhaps, because we don't know necessarily what they wanted her to see, or why they had to be like that, because, it did seem extreme. I will say that to have to trying to function plus having what I can only call sort of spontaneous shamanic kind of journeys to this other existence or whatever it is. I don't know that it was she's left confused and I'm left confused. So in a way, we hope that this book is kind of what they wanted her to do, and that they then don't really, or these whatever energies it is, don't really bother her with it, because, if that's what it's prompting is to share stuff about this subject, then okay, like, fine, we do that, but you shouldn't need like dozens and dozens of weird, like, intense kind of out of body type experiences. It seems a bit much. So it's a bit different perhaps to what other people's experience have been, in the abduction and even in the sort of shamanic journeys and past lives. It crosses all those lines. But it's not as clear cut as to why. People might say, okay, I had a past life experience. I found myself as a Roman soldier, and I got stabbed with a sword. Now I understand why I always have this pain in my stomach, and then the pain goes away because you make that connection that on some psychical consciousness level, you're holding on to a pain that existed in the past. And like, okay, I get that. I can kind of get that. And then there's that point. The loop closes. Now wherever people want to believe there's no past life, or there are, or if it's just something in your psyche, whatever, the loop closes and that pain goes. So you understand there was a point to that experience.
Yeah.
And again, like with shamanic journeying, usually it's going to find a solution to heal something or learn something.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very clear objective. And even with the abduction experiences, usually the aliens want to show them a video of future events, or they want to tell you that you should be doing this in your life, or they take some they seem to be taking your DNA, or again, you see there's something clear in why it's happening, and like with Danny's experiences, there isn't always that, and they're very peculiar.
I did have physical things after. I did have one pregnancy that just suddenly the baby disappeared. I went for a scan.
Strange things that happen.
The lady doing the scan said to me, "I see where it was, but where is it now? It's like it's literally been plucked from you."
There was weird.
How long ago was it? How long was it?
So that was back in 2012. All of that, wasn't it?
Well, that particular experience, I think that was 20. Yeah, it was 2012. Yeah.
All the main weirdness happened over that
2012.
year, really.
And was that within the first month, or was that like
second month? I think the second month.
Second month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was weird like faces, like in the look like faces in the scan.
Yeah.
And like there's a couple of different. One looks a bit like a jaguar, and the other one looks like a kind of like a Mayan guy in profile, like in the scan of her womb. I mean, so. Obviously we have that. I mean, if privately we can pretty show you that. But really strange other stuff that would link in, and it's like, what the
what's going on?
And like the woman actually saying, is there anything odd going on? She's like looking at the scan, looking at these like silhouettes. And she's like, is there anything strange going on? Without wanting to seem to say. Because in Ecuador, keep in mind that, there's a very different mindset, and going to a shaman or a healer, it's quite normal. So, and also there's an acceptance of psychical and magical phenomena that you wouldn't have if you went to a doctor in the US or Canada or Australia, So, I mean, they're actually sort of looking at it, and obviously they're thinking, well, that looks pretty fucking weird. Have you got anything going on, So there was stuff like that, associated strange phenomena. I mean, I don't go into all of it. There's a lot of side story beyond the alien stuff. But we had a lot of stuff going on. I just say psychical paranormal phenomena going on for the whole of 2012 that didn't all connect to these events, but just a whole wealth of experiences, really.
And the book itself, again, we're talking about an 800,000 year history. Now, again, if you want to go by Zachariah Sitchin's numbers, and if anybody in the YouTube chat or in any chat wants to correct me on the timeline we're talking. what? I think they'd like given like 600,000 years or something was like 150,000 years.
450 is the date I've seen
Okay.
a few times. I think there was an interview with him in New York, and in that interview he says to the journalist it's 450,000 years ago. So I can't say I've read all his books. So I mean, I assume that's the date he uses in the books.
And this is obviously a much, I'm going to say, longer timeline.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the best way, because I know that there were, if anybody knows my schedule, or if anybody, the listeners who have been following the show, you know what I have been going through on a weekly basis since the beginning of January. 20-hour days, 6 days a week. Gotta love it. Oh, like, well, you guys are parents. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. It's difficult, especially when they're very young. You know.
She's sleeping on her own finally. We can put her down and she stays asleep. I'm happy. It's getting there finally. I'm like, okay, good. But the idea to review notes, I'm like, okay, well, I want to be able to come in fresh with this. And I'm like, okay, well, now how do I start with the entire process? And I'm going to start with
the date.
The date.
Well, the date. The date itself is 800,000 years ago, and we discussed on the last show, Bruce, the timeline for human migration. How being able to bridge the two for anybody who comes in here and says, okay, well, they're 45 minutes into this interview, and I say, okay, well, where do you start? Start at that point, and it's like we close the last one off, and all of a sudden, you're there now, and bridging the two. Is there any link between your work and the work that we are going to see in this upcoming book?
Yeah, there is. I mean, that's why, see, Danny wanted to have me do the main scientific research, so she's sort of narrating that journey and talking a little bit about some of her related experiences. But the body of research, a lot of it, does come out of existing stuff I've done for my other book. So obviously I had an awareness of the latest papers, on human origins and evolution and genetics, so we didn't have to go into it like from scratch and say like, okay, now let's look for evidence of aliens and let's see when humans appeared and, is there any fiddling around, so it means that, there was that overlap and that I already had those notes, so to speak, where I could just go back and say, well, I have seen anomalies already. Like, let's see if this all fits together. It does overlap. The dates, in some cases overlap as well. Particularly that date you've mentioned.
Now, from that date, I'm not sure if any point if they had pointed you, or at least from these downloads that you were getting. Do you know where the downloads were coming from? Do you think that it was more interdimensional, or do you think it was more extraterrestrial in nature?
How would you sort of put it? I mean,
it's hard to say. I think a bit of a blend of both. Obviously there's time travel involved in it. Obviously whatever was going on at that point was a point in time where, again, things were changing. There was like hybrids coming out of the city. They were creating a different type of, I guess, warrior, because we're talking about 7th century Mexico when they're in pure battle mode, and there's this need for 4-foot Mayans to be taller, stronger, faster, more intelligent.
They sort of messing around with the people.
Yeah, they were messing about. There were underground labs. There were things that were going on at that time that I saw when I was going back to that time, that I thought was strange. And I thought, right, and with my conversations with characters of that time, they were explaining to me that this has been happening all the time, that things go in cycles, that, this is not a new thing.
No, so there's a very strong alien element to these journeys. There was. It wasn't just that they were strange in themselves.
Yeah.
As she says, there's a lot that she told me that is directly seeing beings there that are non-human, or that are modified humans.
Yeah.
And
so it did tie straight into that, aliens thing as well.
Well, which sounds very similar to Van Daniken's initial books. So
sure. I mean, and it does link with that. I mean, I used to run a website called 2012rising.com, and I was very much involved with the Mayan.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to run that. I ran that for 7 years. I was very much involved with the Mayan calendar topic, and obviously very familiar with the subject of Mayans and Palenque and all of that, everything to do with it.
Yeah, and I wasn't.
And, I had an experience before I met Danny, back in 2002. The reason why I ran 2012rising.com, which some people may have known during that period, it was a fairly popular blog. I actually got into that because I had an experience a bit like hers. I was in a chat room for a spiritualist organisation called Hafani Coed, which is the sort of UK spiritualists. They have a National Spiritualist Union. There's a website. I was on there talking to someone else about psychic things. I was going through my own spiritual awakening, I suppose you'd call it, and psychic awakening. So I used to talk to people in the chat room there. And one day, literally, I was talking to this girl called Tracy, and then suddenly, bang, I was out of my body. I was flying through the air over a jungle. Ahead of me was a white stepped pyramid. And this was all absolutely vivid, totally immersive. I guess you call full VR. It was flying towards this thing. And then I could see a guy on top of the pyramid, and he was like, in skimpy Mayan old style clothes. I mean, I didn't know at the time it was Mexican Maya. I just knew it was like weird, obviously Mesoamerican looking situation. The guy was doing stuff. I sensed that there was like a secret tunnel in the top of this building. I seemed to know stuff about it. And then I was like back, I was back in my body. And I said to the woman, look, I just had the really weirdest experience, just typing, I just had the weirdest experience. And she said, I know, I was there too. And she said, and I got the message that this experience was for you, and also that the date was 675 AD. And I was like, okay, what the fuck? So we both, spontaneously went from being chatting in a chat room. And like, she was also like someone involved in psychic stuff, so we both people that had experiences, strange experiences, but not like that. And suddenly both found ourselves in this, I got a full VR, I don't know if it's like you go there, like you're really being taken somewhere by aliens, or if you're being projected a virtual immersive VR into your head. Like, I can't tell you that. All I can say is it's fully immersive. And that, that set me on that path. I mean, the whole reason why I ended up involved with the Mayan calendar and 2012rising.com was that experience, because I wanted to understand what the hell was that about? Why the Mayans? What was going on? I knew that, the subject, the calendar, was bubbling in the background. And so I became very involved in that. So I had an experience a bit like Danny's, but long before her. And so it's kind of funny that when she met me, that's when it started happening to her, and then it was like full on for her. Instead of having one, she had lots of these experiences. So it wasn't the first time that particular phenomena had entered our lives. It's just at the time we weren't together. So it is a bit bizarre. And now the blanks have been filled in a lot, and obviously my involvement in that subject's been filled in a lot as to why they wanted me to do that. Because in the experiences where Danny's had, she's seen me in Palenque as essentially the military commander under Hannah Pacquiao, and dealing with a hybrid, a not normal person, and like a plus 7 foot hybrid who's in control of the military forces and so answers only to Hannah Pacquiao, and are quite clearly all involved with this weird exopolitical situation dealing with other non-human groups that are on the planet. And just, totally bizarre. And like I say, whether you look at this as past lives or shamanic journeys or aliens, or whether they're beaming it into your head and giving you a VR experience, like we can't tell you that, because, you have to, when something's so strange.
I wish I knew. Yeah,
you have to be careful not to put on it and say, well, I had a time travel experience, or I had a past life experience. Because the truth is, you had a very strange, altered state of consciousness in which this phenomena presents itself. Like, you can't really know for sure the source of that phenomena, or test it in a rigorous scientific way, because I can't put it in a test tube and put it under an electron microscope and say, look, let's look at this phenomena. How do you do that? You can't. So you're put in a very difficult position where you can't really say what's happened to you, only what you've experienced.
Yeah. Mine was very physical. That's one thing I do want to say. Mine was very physical. I remember in one experience, because I don't remember them all, where I was given something to drink and in a laboratory, and I started throwing up. And Bruce said that he pushed the bed away from the wall, and he's holding me, and I'm throwing up on the side of the bed. Yeah,
reacting to a chemical she's given that's not in this world.
And have that happen, and then wake up that morning with my eyes completely, like, especially on the sides where I'd been beaten on the other side. And my daughter walks in and she's like, what the hell have you done to my mum?
It looks like I've, given her a bit of
I just woke up like that, and having scratches and having my hair torn out and things.
So, yeah, it's strange.
So it was like, to me, yes, it's an abduction of the soul, perhaps not the body, but how do you explain that?
Yeah, and you can't, like, obviously you wish you had a video camera and you can record it from the other side, but stuff like this, just, it's not possible. We don't have a way to do that. So all you can do is try and test that against observable reality and say which bits mesh. And like, for example, I mean, we wrote in our first book, which was about that subject, 2012 Rising, The Last Old Kin. One of the things we said in there was, she explains that there's an underground aspect to Palenque in which there are tunnels, and through these tunnels, water flows, right? Because she's in there with these beings. And then in 2016, a project was carried out, and they found that in front of the main pyramid at Palenque, there's 9 tunnels radiating out from under the ground, and that through them, water is flowing, right? So that was an unknown at the time, right? In 2012, nobody knew that, right? Now they do know. Yes, there is an underground tunnel system in front of the pyramid, and it does have water flowing through it. So things like that, then you think, well, okay, that's like objective, supportive evidence of things that you've seen in an altered state. So then it starts to overlay with that. Well, okay, well maybe this isn't purely, a psychological invention or purely a projection, that there is information in there that you can validate. And that underlies this book project, if you like, is that although this second book, underlying it is some strange phenomena, but we have sought to do that same principle to say, well, can you mesh objective phenomena with things observed in these kind of states? And thus, in that way, validate that they are genuine experiences that bring genuine information.
Yeah.
Then let me ask you this question, because I'm going to get right to the point on this,
Sure.
and we can build off of that. If you're claiming that there has been ancient alien contact, do you actually have evidence of this claim? Yes or no?
We do. Yes, but not focused on Palenque.
That's very specific. And which is also a different, people will point to artifacts, or they'll point to buildings which could very well have been built by human beings. So this is
we didn't do any of that.
Okay, so this is verifiable proof that has been cross-checked.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Scientifically objective evidence that we're using to validate this.
Well, shit, that's enough for me.
Again,
good enough. Good night, everybody. We're good. I'm kidding.
Doesn't involve.
You guys are awesome. You said it's good.
No buildings. It's no looking at out of place artifacts. We're not looking at the shape of people's temples or trying to look at their blood types or looking at what's written in Mayan or Egyptian or Sumerian or there's zero of that. It's really not about that kind of where you have to agree with someone's interpretation of a possible recording of something that might have happened.
Okay.
Which has been the mainstay of the ancient alien subject since it began.
Well, let's start back at 800,000 years ago, and what's the starting point?
Well, the starting point is the first thing people need to know, and it relates to that date you said earlier, 450,000 years ago, is that, there's been a lot of claims that, we arose 450,000 years ago, and that, that's the popular narrative in the Sitchin sort of stories. Others, give slightly different dates. But the science tells us that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans have a common ancestor, right? And depending on which scientists go to at the moment, it's between 700 to 800,000 years ago. But there's been a project which shows it's far closer to being about 770 to 790,000 years ago. There's been specific genes that have been sampled in Neanderthals and humans and cross-referenced to see when those genes last shared a common ancestor. And those came up as 780 to 790,000 years ago. There's a specific blood protein, again, has been sampled, which links back to a shared ancestor 800,000 years ago. I mean, I can go on and on with that. Basically, multiple projects, most of them in the last 2 years, which tell us that we broke away, Neanderthals, us, Denisovans, broke away from that shared hominin ancestor very close to 780,000 years ago, right? So, so people can forget about the 450,000, they can forget about 200,000 years ago, they forget about all of those other dates, right? Because those are not scientifically supported, right? So no matter what you're reading in these other books, it's not scientifically supported, yeah? So that's the starting point. So if you're going to say that ET have created the first Homo sapiens, you better have some evidence that goes way back. It has to go back to around that time. Yeah, it's no good saying that there's Sumerian or there's temples, because that is way too recent. Like, we cannot objectively say Egyptians and Sumerians witnessed events 780,000 years ago, right? There's no way. It's impossible. Yeah. All you can say is maybe that or legends were passed down, or maybe their shamans went into, cyberspace or whatever and somehow picked up on things, but they did not objectively see any of this happen. Okay, so 780,000 years ago, you don't have any written languages, you don't have buildings, you don't have any of that. So what you're going on instead is you've got to find the genetics is one of the strongest parts, but there's more to this. As we said, this is also about validating information from unusual sources, and so we took an unusual source that we felt offered the potential, right? And this is a book which I have here called Alturinga, right? When the first ancestors were created, right? This is written by an Australian medium. Her name is Valerie Barrow, and the book contains a claim that basically a artifact came to be left with her, and the artifact is what's called a Turinga stone. And the Turinga stones are a sacred artifact of the Aboriginal peoples of, I believe it's the central and northern part of Australia. There's a couple of different groups that have these. They are claimed to hold part of the spirit of beings that lived in the Alturinga times. And the Alturinga times is the time of creation, the first moments, right? When the ancestors were created. Right? And so this stone came into her possession, after which she started having contact with a voice which said it was Alturinga, the voice coming from the stone, started telling her about these creation events and that there'd been a star person involvement. It then said you're going to meet a whole string of people who have memories that they can tell you, which will help you. And she did. She met about 20 to 30 people. Each gave her some bit of spontaneous remembered, if you call it past life type memories about this event, this visitation and modification of an early hominin. On its own, okay, she said herself, she's not asking anyone to believe it because she's not offering you any evidence, right? Which is fine. So what we said is, well, hang on a minute, if this is correct, which we suspected it was, then some of the events should mesh with real objective phenomena from that period, right? From the period where this has happened. Right. So you have in the story, the key points that we've looked at is you have the description of a large crystalline craft which arrives here, and through the way it's described, I would say it arrives here through a wormhole because of the way the journey is described. It's certainly through a spatial anomaly of some sort, beginning in the Pleiades but arriving here. Now, so we get into this thing of Pleiadians, but it's made very clear these beings don't live in the Pleiades, right? They have a gateway from there to here. They've come from multiple planets. That's the claim. The craft is destroyed by a group that are already on Earth who are supposed to be handing the planet over to them in an agreement. So there's a betrayal. The ship's destroyed. Very few survive. The survivors come down. They realize they can't colonize the planet, which was their original plan, that what they can do is leave their genetic signature in the local hominin and set it on a new path where it will essentially colonize the planet for them in a kind of a strange way, that they will live on through these hominins that they've created and change the direction of the planet in the direction they wanted it to go, but via this more obtuse way. They can no longer simply use their technologies because there isn't enough technology left. They have like 3 or 4 small craft. They use what's remaining to set up a project to modify these existing hominins at this period. I've had to track down the period. Initially in that book, the date that comes up is mostly 900,000 years ago, right? That's what most people felt. It was around 900,000 years ago. So I went looking for objective phenomena, and what I found is I can't support that date, 900,000 years ago, but all of the evidence that I looked for has pointed to 780,000 years ago. I found initially fragments of the craft. Now I'm going to say these. The way the craft is described, obviously crystalline, and the way it's described as being destroyed, it leads you to look for something on the lines of melted, highly silica material, right? So I looked for that. I tracked down what I consider to be the remnants, and they date to 780,000 years ago, right? Also, there is a description in there of a second mission 5 years later, which involves essentially the repercussions for this betrayal. That a separate group who are allied with these aliens comes to the planet, tells those on the under the surface in their caverns, tells them, look, you leave the planet, you've broken the agreement, you've basically blown up a non-hostile colonist ship from our alliance. You leave now or we will destroy you. And this other group, most of them leave. They take a hyperspace back to Orion, where they're from. Some of them don't. And this second group of ships uses asteroids, which they pull behind their craft. This is described in the book. they then bombard the planet with asteroids, right? So this is, again, is a specific event that you would expect to leave tangible traces. You wouldn't expect it to just be, something that you couldn't find any evidence of. And so we tracked down the geological evidence and found that, in fact, about 2 years ago, at the end of 2016, a team of German scientists have detected evidence of a multiple bombardment of the planet by asteroids, right? They hit the Americas, they hit Asia, Australia, they hit Canada, right? There was this mad bombardment of large asteroids, and they date it to between 780 to 790,000 years.
I've heard this story before.
So,
my mother told it to me when I was young.
About the bombardment. So, I mean, I know in 2016 a news story came out. I don't know if it's anywhere else whether she would have got it from, but yeah, there's a news story from 2016 where they talk about this. So you get this. So that's the second part, right? But of course, then, you have to mesh in that the claim is they're creating Homo sapiens. So, you have to look, when did Homo sapiens start to emerge? 780,000 years ago, right? So when you start putting together these kind of things, then you have to say, well, hang on a minute. Something fucking weird, right, is going on here. And the evidence, and this book is written in 2002, before the papers on some of these things have even existed, right? And like I say, she makes no claims that she has any evidence. No. It's like, do you feel that this is true? Up to you. Yeah. I can't, she can't prove it. We've gone away and said, well, let's have a look. And then on top of that, we found that at that same period, 780,000 years ago, is the last time that there was a magnetic pole shift on this planet. So we know something else fucking weird, right, is going on. And in fact, whatever it was that happened, right, it disrupted that cycle, because it used to be every 200 to 300,000 years, we would have a pole shift, like an axial, like a magnetic pole shift. Hasn't happened since 780,000 years ago, because whatever it was that happened then has disrupted that cycle. Also, at the same period, the Milankovitch cycles, the climate cycles, that they used to be right in a 40,000 year. There used to be a 40,000 year cycle, changed to 100,000 years. Right, there was this flip. They call there's a term for it. I can't remember what it's called. But basically, right on then, they say something disrupted the normal climatic cycles of our planet, and that there's no explanation for it. We don't know what it was, but it's made a profound change. And there was also a period of climatic chaos from around that period going on from then for hundreds of thousands of years. So I think there's more to it than I think there may have been an axial pole shift of the planet, not just a magnetic pole shift. That it's possible this bombardment or something else that was done caused an axial pole shift, in which case you would have a much different, impact of this. Because it seems that something has happened either in the rotation or the positioning of the planet or something that's so profound it's changed these two fixed cycles that both of the magnetic pole shift cycle and these climatic Milankovitch cycles have both been profoundly disrupted right at the same moment that we have the claims of this destruction of this ship, the modifying of humans, the bombardment of the planet. They are all focusing in on one period, 780,000 years ago. And these are, anomalous events. When you have an anomaly stacked on an anomaly, stacked on an anomaly, stacked on an anomaly, something's going on, And again, I'll go back a bit to the ship. The material as well is anomalous. Again, so I mean, we have this material is not just I found some material and it dates the same. I mean, the book will explain in more detail. It's also anomalous. So we have on all levels anomalous. I should let you just quickly to put in there because I know I have a chance to rant on. But
I got up. I got up. Well, I'm not even questions at this point. It's like I can start going into some really, really weird shit. That I know my in-laws who see that I have been posting the shows on my Facebook wall. They're like going, it's like, so you're into that like alien stuff. I'm like, usually we lampoon them, and I actually said, we always lampoon them, but this time I don't think we're going to lampoon them because we're going to go down really deep on the rabbit hole on this one. My mother basically recounted exactly the same thing you did and has been doing that since I was a child. If you're seeing this information...
Where did she get it from then? Do you know? Or how does that come about?
She never told me.
Right, okay.
From what you're saying as far as the dates, they pretty well line up. The only difference in the story is that Earth actually wasn't supposed to have been what was it? They hit Mars because Mars had been made to be the actual landing spot or made to seem like it, where they were actually on Earth and they came back to Earth and said, okay, well, now they're actually here, and then they hit here. So that is what at least I've been told by her. And where she got that information, I don't know. She may have just kind of pieced it together from the various books that she's read or from information that she had gleaned from some source. Could have been a download. I know that she is a better, more psychically in tune than I am. I'm a better tarot card reader, but in terms of being able to either empathically or telepathically deal with messages or images, like for instance, my wife can corroborate this. My mom is a sender. My father, he's a receiver, even though he doesn't know and he doesn't believe in this stuff at all. My wife and I were at their house, and they didn't know that we were bringing our dog over. And we showed up with, our child and my dog, and he was running around. And he always lays down on the floor. And my father was about to leave work. He usually leaves, let's say, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, gets home around 3:30. And he usually goes to the store and buys some stuff. And I'd said to my mom, it's like, what, one of these days, we have to get a bed and bring it here. And I shit you not, half an hour later, my dad walks into the house with a giant dog bed, exactly the color that I told him it was going to be, and exactly one that I told my mom. And my mom's just been able to do weird shit like this through our entire lives.
So she may have picked it up herself, and potentially.
So,
and also, as well, keep in mind as well, as I say in this original book, there's over 30 people who have given information to Valerie that's been included in the book. So, I mean, this tells you that there's a great many people who have some semblance of remembering or knowing about this event, that she was able to encounter that many people in a short space of time who each told her something, a fragment, that they would literally, when, they would, usually she would just show them a picture of these glyphs from Gosford, which, most people consider to be just some fake Egyptian glyphs. Now, whatever, I'm not going to go into, I can't prove or disprove what they are, but usually she would just show them a picture of these glyphs, right? And then they would start remembering being either part of the mission or one of the beings that shot at the ship, or even that they were one of the first hybrid humans that were created. They remember a life or part of a fragment of that life, and they would give her some piece of information she would use. Now, if 30 people have it, I'm going to say a lot more people out there have some fragment of this or some memory or some sense of it having happened, because it's unlikely that that was all the people of the world that had a tune in on this. And I sort of cover in the book, that there's a number of ways that could happen. Like, it could be that there is genetic cellular memory, that in our DNA is literally being programmed, because we know it's a program. Like anyone who works, you're a computer guy, I'm a computer guy. Like I don't have to be a geneticist, to know a bit about DNA, because it's a program, right? We know it's a program, it's running, information, right? So we don't know what's recorded in there. We know it's incredibly complex. And we know that it can do fantastical things because it's creating things like us, right? And it goes on changing them and creating them and recreating. So what else is hidden in the DNA? We don't know. Is there a message left by these modifying beings that at some point will activate and tell us about that story? That's one possibility, right? I can't ignore that. Then on another level, we know that through sort of what they call epigenetics, that sometimes the actions and behavior of your ancestors influence you, and it may be things like, coming down to you from them, including what we call, habitual behavior. And what's the word? When people, you just know how to, to avoid a spider, you know to avoid a snake, because we have those kind of, what's the word?
It's like genetic coding.
Yeah, where you sort of, know
Instincts.
Stuff without learning it. Instincts, thank you. Yeah, we now know that instincts are a kind of epigenetics, this programming within the genes that is something that your ancestors did. So again, it may be that it's something to do with genes and DNA, or conversely, aliens could be beaming stuff into people's heads. I can't say that they couldn't do that. When you start talking about technologies of beings that are maybe at least 800,000 years more advanced, and they were in a spaceship then, right? So how much more advanced are they now? We don't know their technology capabilities at this point. Okay, that's another potential. And then on top of that, there's a really interesting one, which is when you look at this subject of the Earth's magnetic fields, right? Which again, we've been talking a little about that with these shifts and these flips. That the Earth has a the Schumann. You've probably heard of the Schumann resonance. There's a number of Schumann resonances, and some of these standing wave resonant frequencies mesh extremely closely with brain frequencies, right? Incredibly closely. Experiments have shown when you take someone away from those frequencies, right, and you put them underground, put them in a shielded lab, then they start to become very unwell, and they also start to be able to, they can't sleep properly. There's all sorts of detrimental effects. So we know it is resonating with the brain. We know it's doing stuff. Now, well, as a guy, I worked, my manager in my last job, I was contracting for the Scientific and Medical Network, and they look at unusual phenomena. It's one of the things that, that it's about. The network is groups of scientists and doctors who look at phenomena beyond the conventional, and one of the guys I was working for, he is a geophysicist, right? And he's written on this, and he says that when you look at this phenomena, he says, it's almost, you could imagine, he said, essentially that information in your brain could be transferring to the field of the planet. Therefore, if that's happening, you should technically also be able to potentially access other people's thoughts and experiences, which have been recorded in that identical frequency of the planet, in the magnetic fields. And consider, we've been recording information in magnetic fields for a long time. I mean, old tape cassettes recorded into magnetic fields and stuff, right? We had magnetic tapes, right? So it's not like a new idea. So that you're recording people's thoughts into the planet, right? And then he said that the time when you're most at resonance with Schumann frequencies is when you're asleep. And, and obviously people talk about having psychic dreams, dreams where you living in other lives or strange downloads, or like you are most in resonance with the planet's field, right? In that Schumann frequency at night when you're sleeping. So you're very likely to then be potentially picking up on other people's information, their thoughts, or even experiences of people who've lived in the past. So it might be that this story is coming back up because we're actually reading it from that field. These are possibilities I explained. And again, of course, it could be past lives as simple as that consciousness goes out of your body, reincarnates, comes back, goes back, comes back, and that it just happens that in this time, a lot of people are remembering that past life. So I offer all of those potential scenarios to people because, again, I'm very careful not to just tell someone, look, it's because of this. Because we don't objectively know for sure. And I think it's too easy for people to say to you, yeah, it's because, I got a download. Or, yeah, because I got past life memories. Or, yeah, it's because the planet. Look, let's be honest. We don't know, but there are these viable answers to that question as to how could it happen? Why is it happening now? That, yes, all of those are sort of 4 potential answers to that. I would tend towards the past life thing, but, I mean, I can't tell you it's definitely that.
Now, do we have an idea of, or is it possible to at least give an idea of the area of the world that these beings landed on or worked in? Well, was it within South America?
No, in Australia.
It is in Australia.
They came down, they landed near Gosford, which is where the glyphs are. And in the story, it claims at least some of the glyphs were drawn with a laser, like an object that had a laser beam, that they engraved some material on the wall there. Now, today there's what seems to be Egyptian and Proto-Egyptian and other pictures drawn on a wall at Gosford. Now, I can't tell you if those are the same things they drew, or if other people went along later and drew stuff, or whether some of those are genuinely done by an alien and some aren't. There's certainly characters there that just seem to be normal Egyptian. Like, why those are there is a whole other question. Did the Egyptians visit, or, are they faked? I don't want to go too much into that because there's arguments on both sides. What I can say is that there's a claim that on that wall there once existed at least some images drawn by extraterrestrials, and that they set up their base camp near to there, and that they'd crashed in the waters of what's called Broken Bay, which is just near there. That a craft went into the water, another craft that managed to come down without breaking up, because they were being pursued. They were crafts. There's another group in this story. Keep in mind that this is a craft that's been blown out of the sky, right? There's about 3 or 4 craft managed to come down. One crashes into the water. Another one is hovering over, rescuing them. The few survivors, less than 100 by the estimate they're given in the book, from a crew of 50,000, right? A colony ship, enormous, kilometer across from what we can calculate. So an enormous vessel, right? You have a handful of survivors. They've lost most of their technology. A few things had already been brought down to the planet, and they've got these ships, and that's about it. Right, so they are now based in southeast Australia, for people that aren't sort of familiar with that. We're not far from Sydney, a bit north of Sydney. So you have this small group. They realise they are incapable of long-term survival on the planet for a number of reasons. The environment's too hostile. The rays from the sun are too powerful. They are being burned by the rays. There's problems with microbial bacteria in the water. They can't really process our water properly. The food is not correct for them. There's all of the problems you'd expect. They can't breathe properly. Yeah. All the things you'd expect, really, in a real life scenario where you've crashed on a planet where you don't have the right facilities, right? So the only fortunate thing at all is that they're able to breathe the gases there without dying, but there's not a pleasant experience. They can hardly breathe, and they have all these other problems. So they know they cannot. This is not going to end as a long-term colonial endeavor at that point, right? So their only other option is they decide is, well, look, the idea is to put this planet under sort of alliance kind of control, improve its situation, take it out of control of these more hostile beings, and to also free up these hominins who've been used as slave labor and who are being played as, being manipulated genetically by this other group. And they say that these hominins themselves have been modified from a primate, that even these early hominins are not a natural development on the planet, that they themselves have been made to be utilized by this other group, right? So you have that echo of the story, of the slave story, but way, way, way older. And I think some of these stories that we get from the Sumerian stuff are probably shamanic journeys and stuff like where people pick up information or past life memories like we're dealing with here, and they bring it back. And it seems like they're talking about in their time, but they're not talking about their time, because this is going back hundreds of thousands of years ago, this creation event, and also this enslavement event. That part of the mission is to end this. And that they said, well, we can't do all that now, but what we can do is we can upgrade the hominin species, and therefore it will have the opportunity to take control of its own planet and of its own destiny and forward things, in the way that we hoped we would have done. And so that's what they did. They did the best they could with what was left. Essentially set up a rudimentary science lab, began to experiment on the hominins that existed, something on the lines of Homo erectus. It may not have been specifically Homo erectus, but a Homo erectus-like hominin. It may have actually been, I have some suspicions, it may be more than one, but they may also have been the ancestor of Homo floresiensis. And there's a reason I say that, because in the book, they mention them being the short, hairy ones, right? And as I understand it, the Homo erectus at the time probably was already undergoing hair loss and was relatively tall. Not necessarily as tall on average as we are, but we know that Floresiensis was tiny, seems to have been a small, hairy, more primate-like hominin living just off the north coast of Australia on Flores, right? And it's assumed in human migrations that anyone who crosses Wallace Line, right, which divides basically Australia from Southeast Asia, any hominins that cross that line should inevitably reach the Australian coast, because you've done the hard work. Right, Wallace's line has all of the strong currents coming down, pushing you out towards out into the ocean. If you cross Wallace's line successfully, there's no barrier to entering Australia, because it means that whatever you've done, whatever it is, whether you've got boats, whether you're being washed along, whatever it is, your next stop is an easy run to the north coast, right? So there's no reason why these Homo florensis shouldn't have been in Australia. Also, if it was Homo erectus, we find tools that are erectus-like tools on Flores. They also, if they made it, they also should have been there. So we may have had one, the other, or both, right, in Australia. It's not recognised now, and I would say part of that is because there's been enormous loss of coastlines of this continent, right? So landing sites where people would have first got here are deep under the sea now. So you will not find, if a coastal hominin group was here, there's no way you're going to find that evidence unless you use submarines, And even then, you've got to hope that they left stone tools or something, objective that you can go down and find, right? So when people say, well, what about the hominins? We have this that is a technical problem, that we know that, yes, any sites where they arrived would now be underwater. But anyway, so in this description, you have these beings. They then say, well, okay, they begin modifying them at the genome level, right? The second thing they do, they think, well, we will test implanting both into hominin mothers and into alien mothers. So they're running a number of trials. They're trying to modify the genes in the way they want them. They splice in some genes of their own, but they don't need to do a lot of that. Now, this is something some need to understand as well, that when people talk about hybrids, it immediately conjures up the idea, like, I don't know, a grey alien lands, has sex with a woman, and they have a half grey, half human baby, right? And that's something that you sort of see in the pop culture of ufology, this idea that we have these half grey, half humans living amongst us, right? Now, in real terms, that is not really likely at all, because you don't need to do that. Right? What you need to do is you need to have an advanced CRISPR type technology where you can go in, right, and start cutting pieces of genes, replicating, inputting fragments in where you want them. You also need to be able to know how to turn on and off gene expression, right? Because all of, our body is essentially genes expressing, like for long arms or for short arms or for a big head or a small head. So, I mean, a truly advanced civilization knows, look, we don't really need to start splicing in all of our genome into these beings. What we need to do is understand their genome and then start to modify how it expresses itself so that we can start to cause, a bigger brain to form, and then particularly a bigger brain. I mean, if you want to upgrade a species, you want it to be more intelligent. Obviously, one of your focal points is intelligence, right? Obviously the brain, you want to get at the genes that express in the brain, right? Those are particularly important, right? Because it doesn't matter really if we've got, big long arms and legs or whatever, because whatever else it is, you want it to be, you're looking for a more intelligent species that can essentially direct its own experience on the planet and not be the slaves of any other beings that might have an interest in this planet. They're essentially self-determining and can then progress forward in time once you're gone, inevitably once you die. So they begin that process. Sorry, I think you're going to say something there.
Well, no, I'll let you finish this line.
Okay, right. So really, what you're looking for is not what people would think. People say, "Well, where's the ET DNA?" Right, and there's another problem with that, right? Because in the book they say something which many people be familiar with, but they say, "Look, DNA itself was seeded on this planet billions of years ago by an advanced extraterrestrial race that seeds planets." Right, so you already have extraterrestrial DNA, because DNA itself is a complex extraterrestrial code, right, that you put onto planets and essentially will put a biosphere on a planet, right? And so the Pleiadians know this. Other species know this. They know what this DNA is. They know how it's got here. They know who's made it. They know how to work with it, right? So they already understand how to modify us because they're familiar with our code, right? They're not saying they made the code, right? My sense of this is, there's probably an elder race that seeds planets. May have seeded their planets, I don't know, but that they're aware that there's planets that are seeded, and that's why we're known about in the first place. That the chances of just finding Earth are very small, right? But if you know of planets seeded by the elder race, then you're going to have a whole chart, a whole list of planets with biospheres, right? Because these are planets that are seeded with DNA. You may have been involved in that seeding, or you may just know who did it. So there's a reason why these species know it. And that's important, because one of the reasons people say, in science, they say, well, aliens wouldn't have come here because how would they find us? We haven't been putting signals into space long enough. We haven't sent out probes far enough. We don't do anything exciting enough. We don't space travel. How would they find us? And there's a really good point, because technically they wouldn't. But if you know the planet's been seeded, then you've already got it marked on your galactic map. That's a seeded planet. Yeah. Keep an eye on that one. We'll see what pops up later when the DNA modifies. So we're a known about planet, right? With different interests watching us. It's also stated that this planet is being used as a living library, and that the DNA contains the code for many spacefaring races that have been essentially in that code, in that 90%, 97% of so-called junk DNA or non-coding DNA, there is the information to code all kinds of weird beings and strange intelligent life forms. They know this as well, that these engineers are starting off with this information. They know they don't have to go in and just start from nothing. And this is an interesting point, because a few years ago some scientists involved in the 100 Genome Project, they actually came out in the news, and people have seen this and said, look, we've been doing this project for 15 years, and we've come to the conclusion DNA is an alien code, and that within the code we're seeing strange patterns which we believe are the signatures of the creators of that code. Right? And they said the 97%, we suspect it is actually information for non-human beings, right? So, I mean, this is not something that either us or even this other book is totally out there from. These are people in the 100 Genomes Project who are looking at that code and saying, what, this looks like somebody has, fucking written it, man, and that they've put in here information to code other beings and stuff. So if you take that into account, this Pleiadian group are in a really good position, because they already know, look, we don't need to splice in loads of material. We just need to know which bits of this code to go into and start turning on, turning off, taking a bit from here and moving it to there. they don't really need to do what most people think. They don't need to start, shagging apes or whatever people like this imagery. They don't need to do that. It's far more high tech and it's far more intelligently directed than that. And so if we go into the genome and you're going to look like what you want to see now is an anomaly, isn't it? You're going to be looking at what is an anomaly in the human genome that would be a signature for an extraterrestrial race modifying a hominin ancestor around 780,000 years ago so that it becomes the first Homo sapiens, right? Like, you're going to look for this, something in the genome, also an expression. Right? In expression, you'll want to see a bigger brain, right? Because, if they're going to upgrade it.
Well, if you're bigger brain, generally meaning your reasoning skills, planning skills, higher memory capacity, reasoning capacity, just
a more complex brain,
critical thinking capacity, the ability to imagine, to visually remember things that you've seen.
Language production, that kind of, exactly. Yeah, the complexity. We want to see neural complexity.
But we have this on various other animals on the planet right now. Elephants being one, dolphins being probably the closest thing brain structure-wise to humans at this point. And even when it comes to elephants, so they say an elephant never forgets for a reason. So we're not necessarily the only ones that have made that leap. There are other, like in intelligence, memory, language, culture. Like culture being a big thing for
dolphins seem to have culture, language, reasoning. Complex social behavior. So, we should be careful of writing them out. They also have a bigger brain than us, but we have a different brain to a dolphin. There's elements that where we may have more synaptic connectivity and stuff like that. So we have a different surface structure to the brain. So we're looking for two things. Brain increase in size, but also more importantly, brain complexity. Because just having the biggest brain on Earth, like the blue whale, obviously has an enormous brain. Like, that doesn't mean it spends all day thinking about like advanced mathematics for the formulas and stuff. Yes, it has a bigger brain, and I'm sure it's an intelligent creature and is probably, the most intelligent creature in the sea. I don't know if that's true. Maybe dolphins have got more neural complexity. I don't know. But they're two big brained mammals. I'm sure, from what we observe, they're both highly intelligent. But I don't think necessarily the blue whale is more intellectually capable than a human being, right? And part of that is because of neural complexity rather than brain size. So we're looking for two things, really. An increase in brain size and capacity, but also, as you rightly point out, these other signatures for a complex brain.
Well, you look at dolphins.
Will allow us to do all kinds of things. Yeah.
There's one thing, like, again, with dolphins, and I'm doing kind of a Joe Rogan thing here, and I'd be able to say, like, Jamie, bring that up, but no, I don't have anybody to do that. So you just have to look at this. So, sorry, guys. Dolphins have been known to do some very interesting things with regards to hunting, whether they're hunting something to drag into the deep waters and rape mercilessly as a pod, because they're known to do that. It was actually one. They put a dummy out. I forget exactly the research group that had done this, but they put a dummy out into the water, and I forget exactly what they were trying to research, but a pod of dolphins actually took it, dragged it down, and they found it in a cave somewhere that had basically been raped and ripped to shreds by this pod of dolphins. Another thing and that's just them being evil as shit, I guess. They're kind of assholes, I guess. They also have known to change the salinity of water by circling and using bubbles. And I think there was actually killer whales who do this, where they, like if you have the density of water is a certain, or if it has a certain density, things will either rise to the surface or they'll sink. It's like with the Titanic, if you got a boat that's sinking straight down, then while it's sinking, because the water is being disturbed, it actually just makes everything sink. The buoyancy goes to shit for anything that's floating. They'll actually do this with bubbles from their blowholes, and they'll use that to hunt, which is phenomenal. As far as just the ability to kind of use what you have in the environment. The only difference is that they don't have opposable thumbs. And
they lack that.
Well, if you're looking at apes can do this only. They can't do this. That's the major difference between us and any primate that's on the planet right now, is we have that opposable thumb. And
Yep.
if it came to brain capacity, chimps and bonobos and gorillas, they do have, I'm going to say, a fairly complex brain, but not necessarily to the same extent where I can say, okay, I can speak to you in language, although we have
Chimps with sign language, haven't they?
yeah. So they can communicate.
Produce sounds that are used in language format. They warn each other. And they communicate things through sound. But yeah, I guess it's certainly a less complex communication system.
So what I'm trying to be able to get at here, I'm playing devil's advocate because we do have a certain reputation as far as being more of a critical thinking show compared to a lot of others out there. Hi Jimmy, how you doing? And I want to make sure that the people at home do understand that we do take that very seriously. So I have to be able to say, for those at home who would say, this is a very fantastical story. Again, we're hitting ancient aliens, we're hitting psychic mediums, we're hitting abduction, we're hitting, and then we're mixing that in with hard science. And people will say, okay, well, there's not much to go on beyond some anomalies in the DNA that we're finding, based on the speed that it evolved, and this apparently. Whether it's degraded material from a craft that may have been within a certain area that you tested and you found. Besides the downloads and besides the besides the material that you found, and you're going off of a book that was brought by a medium, how are you double checking these things to say, okay, this is very likely the result? And then able to base that off of the medium. How can the nuts and bolts people who only will believe in the nuts and bolts and the critical thinking be able to take somebody who wrote a book in 2002 and said that I received this information from somewhere? And again, my mother had told me very, very similar things myself when I was younger. So there are going to be those people who will say that information is out there. Maybe it was written by a Sitchin type individual. I don't have every single ancient alien book on the planet that I've read or in front of me that I can pull up or search. But how would you counter something like that and say, no, this is the process that we've taken, and if I'm putting my name out there, considering that I've got this reputation as being this important researcher, how can you say to them, this is something you need to look at seriously? Despite the fact that there's a lot of stuff back here that may not make much sense, or may, may have to be taken on faith, as it were. How do you rationalize it?
Yeah, the first thing is I think I start off in the book. I spend some time on the first part of the story, the strange stuff. But I also bring in something we need to consider here, and that is that when you're dealing with intelligences, right, that at least say 1 million years ahead of us, judging by what we're talking about. So if they can create humans 800,000 years ago, and they're arriving in a spaceship which has a crystalline frame, which has an intelligence actually in the frame of the craft, and an advanced AI is the ship. The ship is alive. We're talking about technologies that are theoretical for us now, right? So we know that in theory, it's already being discussed that maybe in the future, we would have crystalline silicon networks with an advanced AI. So we're talking about, already they're well ahead of us then, right? So how far ahead are they now? Well, I'm going to say at least 1 million years ahead of us, right? At least. So what would we expect from that kind of contact? Imagine that the contact with an intelligence that's that far ahead. I argue that we should expect something quite bizarre. And that what we're seeing, this is the first point I make, is people say, well, this all seems quite bizarre. Yes, you've got an intelligence which can travel through wormholes, right? Wormholes allow you to travel in time as well as space, right? You can bend the fabric of time-space, right? So they're already at that point where they can time travel into space, have ships that are alive, that travel through wormholes, that, are clearly demonstrating themselves telepathic abilities between them, all of that. And that's like 800,000 years ago. I believe that we're in a contact continuum, and that what we're seeing, when we see all these things like channeling, people saying, oh, they're channeling, or they're saying, I met an alien, or I saw an orb in the sky, or I'm a star seed. Yep. What we're really seeing is a contact continuum that contact has never stopped. The idea of first contact. People, we're waiting for first contact. First contact, right, that has been and gone. You've missed it. That happened 800,000 years ago. What we're in now is a contact continuum where they've always been aware of us, always watching, always visiting, choosing select people to give information to, going to the shaman in his cave, telling them stuff about what's happened, going to the psychic medium, giving them a download, landing somewhere, talking to Native Americans and telling them that they're from the Pleiades, which they'll tell it. Ask the Cree where they're from, don't take it from me. Ask the Cree where they'll say, there's a spider web, and in the middle of it's the Pleiades, and it's got a hole, and it takes you to the land of the creators in the Pleiades, and that they once put a thread down and came to Earth, and that we our ancestors. But I didn't make that up, Yeah, ask the Mayans, where were they focused on? Well, we built all our temples aligned with the Pleiades because the gods, the star gods were from the Pleiades. Or the Aboriginals. The Seven Sisters came from the Pleiades and they walked on our land, and that when they were here, they returned either by going up a magically growing tree trunk, a tunnel, or a serpent rope, right? Yeah, all of these descriptions of these wormholes are there for you. All of these cultures are saying, right, we remember either visits from the Pleiadians or contacts from them or downloads from them. This continuum has been going on, right, the whole time. And it's so big and so strange, right, that when you look at it, like if you're a person who's like, I just work in, I work in my job 9 to 5, what's this stuff about? Like you're not going to see it. You're not going to see it because the complexity of a species that can look at you across time and space and can essentially look at periods, right, in your development, as though they're looking at what to do on a Sunday, a Sunday afternoon, right? We're trying to put our brain into that thinking. Probably they're not even biological anymore. The most likely result of an extremely advanced intelligence, if you look at our scientists, they'll say, well, it's very unlikely they'll be biological. They'll probably be post-biological. They may have even entered the quantum background of space or uploaded themselves into computer networks or be within a silicon structure because it allows better processing than carbon structures. But you start looking at what do the scientists expect? And then they say, they'd have technologies that are indistinguishable from magic. They can probably alter the background of reality. Like, what? Oh, hang on a fucking minute. Isn't that exactly what we're talking about? Isn't that what, like you said, all that strange stuff? Isn't that exactly, when you look at what these scientists are saying, well, you'd expect them to be doing this. Like people expecting the landing on the White House lawn with a silver disc, landing, out comes human-looking guy or robot, shakes hands with the president, contact is established. That is not the contact that is going to happen in reality. You're in contact, right? If they want to make you see that happen, they can make you see it. The first thing is, most of the UFOs people see, let's be honest, they're not physical craft, right? The most commonly seen phenomena that can't be objectively written off as a plane, bird, whatever, is a sphere of glowing light, right? And that sphere of glowing light can do impossible fucking things, right? It can disappear, it can teleport, it can multiply itself and bilocate into 10 pieces, it can zip off at light speed, right? And also, what else does it like to do? It likes to turn itself into triangular crafts. It likes to turn itself into black helicopters. It turns itself directly into beings that walk around in front of you, right? That sphere of light is not a physical fucking object, and it is not a technology that is comprehensible to the average human being, right? Like, you got to throw that out there, because anyone who still thinks, I'm looking up and I think there's these airplanes that they're not fucking airplanes, mate. They are not fucking airplanes. And if you ask the Mayans and people when they've seen these things, they've watched, if you read the accounts of, say, RD6 Killer Clark and her books, where she's encounters with the Native American peoples, and some of the accounts these Mayans and Native Americans give you, they say they've been in the jungle and they've been at Mayan sites or something at night, camping, and they've seen these spheres of light come down and then just turn directly into these tall, 7 foot tall, slightly blue coloured beings who we would consider one of these groups from the Pleiadian group. They're the ones that we have had encounters with. And they've seen them walking around doing stuff at these old Mayan temple sites. Yep. And when they leave, they turn into a ball of white light and they fuck off. So, that is not technology in the way that humans are expecting to have an encounter with a technological civilization. That's why I'm saying that people are not seeing the contact that's underway. And they're still waiting for this solid, objective, physical craft, contact, White House law. That is not going to happen, mate. All these things that are happening, these people saying, I'm a starseed, or I remember something, or I'm past lives with aliens, or that's contact. These aliens are so alien to us, so intelligent, right? They can see that to do this, there has to be a continuum. Firstly, one in which we don't modify completely the direction that the human species goes. We've already done it once, right? Mm-hmm. Let's not go back in and just keep on fucking doing it all the time, because what's the point? Let them at least try and run things themselves, right? Without us objectively interfering by landing all the fucking time, telling them what to do, right? But still, now and again, doing little tweaks where maybe they do put some extra DNA into some people. Maybe they do watch people. Maybe they sometimes make a contact, ask people, so, what do you think of us, or whatever. They're doing all sorts of strange things. They're also incarnating. They make it very clear they can direct their incarnations, right? In the same way that a Tibetan Buddhist master will say, I will choose my next life. I will choose to be a boy in this village over here because I've meditated my whole fucking life. I know how to direct my consciousness, and I will choose to be somewhere else. They're saying they can do that. They can do that as easy as you've seen, like altered carbon. As easy as taking a fucking sleeve, right? These beings will take an incarnation on our planet as a human, as a fucking dolphin, as an eagle, as whatever they want that they can download their consciousness into. That they've gone beyond this thing where we can think of as just people in physical ships doing physical things limited by the physical laws of our physical universe. They are living in a quantum-based law reality, where the phenomena is no longer, they're not limited by what we see as, these physical laws. Oh yeah, that's fine. But look at quantum reality. Look where you can have interlinked particles and bilocation and teleportation and all these things that our cutting edge sciences are doing right now in labs. And they're telling us, this molecule, this picture of a molecule, see this other picture, it's not two molecules, it's the same one in two places at once. I mean, that's already happened. This shit has already happened. And they're teleporting using information to teleport small objects. That's happened, right? Put 1 million years onto our technology, and then you start to get an idea what these beings are doing and what they can do and what not to expect. And another reason why you will never see the landing on the White House lawn, which a lot of people are still waiting for, will say, why don't they do it? What do people really think that would be taken as in our current situation with our current leadership and the kind of things that they like to get up to? Wow. That if spaceships landed right outside the most, high security installation pretty much on the planet, they're going to say it's a fucking invasion. And we are going to be in a nightmare scenario where our governments say, it's happened. The aliens have invaded. Let's come together. It's Independence Day. Let's get the laser weapons going. Let's put the platforms up in space. The war is fucking on. And these beings are not stupid, right? They are not fucking stupid. They're playing a long game, and they can see what we're up to, right? They can see what leaders we've chosen. They can see that we have these secret space projects and whatever's going on, and breakaway, secret black projects, doing all sorts of weird stuff. They're not stupid. They're not going to just fly in and give the winning card so that those people can say, yeah, look, it's the alien invasion. Like we always thought it was going to happen. Especially right now with all this stuff that's going on. With certain groups out there telling us aliens are a threat. There should be platforms like right now in the news, mainstream media are telling us aliens are a threat. UFOs are real. They're a threat. There should be special projects to get ready for for a war with aliens. Right? That's happening. Don't tell me these beings are unaware of that. They're not fucking stupid. They can see that we're right on that edge of that. And if they start doing landing, even if they have a physical representative to come down from one of these groups, I don't think that's going to be spun in the way that we think it would be spun. I think it would be a disaster. And so what they're doing instead is much more subtle, and that they are trying to influence away from that kind of scenario where we end up being the pariah of the cosmos and unwelcome in any kind of other, groupings beyond this world, with truly intelligent species who have gone beyond this stage, who've survived the transition from basically non-intelligent to intelligent and truly technological advance, truly understanding the nature of reality and being able to bend it, right? We're nearly there. And they are watching to see what we will do at this stage. And if we make it, we probably will have full contact in the observable, transparent. Not one guy saying he sees a UFO in his, outside his bedroom, or one person saying that they remember in a past life. Yeah. All of that strange phenomena. You have to put it together. Too often, you'll have a specialist in past lives, a specialist in UFOs. I'm a generalist, right? Anyone listening to this can tell I'm a generalist. Yeah. Right? I look at all unexplained phenomena. I've been looking at it for 30 odd years, right? The only reason why I can put this together into a sort of sensible narrative is because of that. If I was just specializing in physical craft recovered by the military, I would spin you a very different story. I'd be saying like, yeah, there's these special alloys, and then they're landing, they're getting these bodies, and like, yeah, that might be happening. There might be a physical group that comes in, their ship's crashed, or they deliberately left one, which is more likely. That's why they'd crash, but deliberately left one so that our government could back engineer it and make weapons from it. Yeah, that's quite possible. I'm sure there's players out there that would find that, you know, of interest to them for whatever reason, you know, because they're alien interest with alien thinking. So I'm not going to say that doesn't happen, but I could spin you that as the whole story, right? Because that would be my specialty. But I'm not specializing in that. So I can tell, yeah, maybe that happens. But I can see also there's a whole load of phenomena. There's shamans in the jungle who are meeting grey aliens in altered states, who are meeting 7-foot Pleiadians in altered states, who see UFO saucer craft in their altered states, right? Not physically, in other dimensions, right? Where they're going into other consciousness levels, they're seeing the same phenomena that people might see in you know, walking through their garden in America or something, saying, like, I saw craft or I saw grey. Yeah, but these people are also seeing it from drinking ayahuasca or something, you know, that, or from just banging their drum. So, I mean, we've got to really put these things together and say, look, this is really fucking complicated, but it's really weird.
But how do we know that it's extraterrestrial and it's not interdimensional?
It is interdimensional. Absolutely, it's interdimensional. Absolutely, and it is quantum phenomena, and that we, you know, that's why we have to look at the nature of reality and the nature of consciousness. If we glaze over that and try to keep this as a 3D story about, you know, physical people from a physical planet coming to our physical world and us being physical beings, and like, it will never make sense. And
that's why it's so dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
The way
if
it's
we play it that
spun.
way, it's a problem.
And that's why I thought, Bruce, you have to get this book out, because now is the moment where things are just getting hyped up. It's getting hot. The topic is getting hotter day by day. You know, the last 2 years, we've seen so many changes in this direction. I was like, right, this book has to come out for those that have the sense to read it and want to know what's really going on and put one and one together, so they don't go down that wrong, you know, path.
Yeah, where it's easy to be just pushed down one way of thinking, or that they're all good or they're all bad. I mean, that's another thing that right now you can see in the ufology. There's this polarity. Either all non-human intelligences, whether physical or non-physical, interdimensional, whatever, they're either all good or all bad. Right, that's a very dangerous position to take as well, because you should take a critically minded position that any being that comes here probably has some level of self-interest, right? Whether they're coming through wormholes or whether they land on the, you know, on your garden, like, because we would go out into the universe with some self-interests, right? We, as humans, we know that. Okay. Yeah. And even if we did inadvertently decide to do some sort of rescue mission on a planet, like, we would weigh that up and say, does it get blowback? Does it have negative implications for us? Does it cost us a lot? You know, we would weigh up all those factors before doing it, right? So we can't just assume other groups are just purely benevolent or that they're just purely evil. I think that, you know, there's groups that are going to have, like us, you know, they're going to have a bit of both. And also they're going to have bad days and good days. And also they're going to have agendas which are in concord with us, where they say, well, you know what, you know, we could do that because we will also benefit. Now that's fine. If they have an agenda where we also benefit and they benefit too, then, like, okay, cool. You know, I'm not against the two parties getting something good out of it. And I think that's where we have to look for, is what are these kind of agendas? Yeah. And that's another, I don't write about so much in the book, but I spend a lot of time thinking about these sort of things, obviously. And, you know, I can see mutual gain agendas that suit some of these groups. For example, I'll just throw this out there as a scenario, right? Our experts on this planet, like the leading psychiatrists, psychologists, exobiologists, etc., they're telling us, right, most advanced species, once they hit truly technological, will become post-biological, yeah, as we said earlier. And so they will start to be able to transition from their bodies either to machines, computer networks, robots, or into the background of space, you know, actually becoming part of the fabric of quantum reality. These are the kind of things they expect, yeah? It'd be quite rare, they think, to encounter a biological life. Now, let's just say that you've been non-biological, living as data for maybe 1 million years or 1 billion years, you know? And you decide, you know what, it'd be nice to experience again. It'd be nice to experience physical reality again as a 3D biological unit. Now, where can we gain access to some of these for incarnational download purposes? Well, there's 7 billion on Earth. Quite a few there, isn't there? So, I mean, when you start thinking about it, you're saying these beings say, yes, we can download. Yes, we can incarnate. Yes, you know, we can just choose to become human. We can be star seeds. Well, look, isn't that? You know, some of these intelligences may be choosing a return. Now, that's fine in a way because they're not coming in and possessing people. You know, they're coming into a fetus and becoming a human being and getting to live again as a biological being. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Right? But we then say, okay, they have a shared interest then in our planet not being thermonuclear blasted to bits, right? And one thing we've seen with the UFO phenomena is they seem to turn off our nukes. They seem to interfere in nuclear devices. There seems to be an interest. I don't think these beings want this planet completely ruined. Probably many of them have ruined their own planets to get to being technological. And their planets may be long gone from the skies. So that we may be a very limited type of biological resource, this planet. There's things like this we have to consider. Yeah. You have to start thinking outside the box.
And again, at the same time, it's entirely possible.
It's far out.
It's possible. And again, considering this is the first time you've actually talked about this, I want to make sure, at least, well, first of all, if you do any more interviews, that if you have any more questions about this, you'll be prepared for it.
Sure.
Because at the same time, considering there is, what's the best way to put it? I've heard a lot of crazy bullshit in ufology. A lot of crazy bullshit. Some of it uses things that are based within this, the reality of what we have as far as technology, or at least the possibility of technology, and using that as an excuse to, implant on what the argument is. People will go to it and say, "Oh my God, this is amazing," without necessarily considering all of the angles. Yeah. If you're saying that everything's possible, that the correlation correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. It doesn't necessarily apply in that for that argument. But because it's possible doesn't necessarily mean that it's true.
That's happened. No, that's why we focused on one specific event in one specific time.
Okay.
Because to give people that anchor, that first, well, look, have ET, do they even exist for a start? Do they exist?
I don't know.
Have they been here? No, well, that's why, we focused on that specific event, and showing that there are the fragments of an anomalous object which came from space, right? That's beyond, that is totally established in our work, that there is absolutely, basically that will be established in the book. People will be able to read about what is this material, why is it's anomalous, why is it that it has to have come from a craft in space, how does that fit in with this story? So that is offered with scientific papers, that have looked at this material, not for me, independently, who have not concluded that it's from an alien craft. They just see it as an anomalous material that has a formation in space, etc. Right? Because obviously they won't leap to, it's from an alien ship, and they have no context to do that, right? But then this actually meshes precisely with the dating, and again as well, two things just here as well. The fact that Australia, right, is relevant here, because if a craft is destroyed in space and anyone comes out of it, right, two things are going to happen. Those craft are going to come down to the land below them, and so is some of the material, right? Where do we find both this story continuing? Australia, where does this material found? Australia, right? Again, from Southeast Australia, where this is. So again, when you say what makes you think this, when you get the interlocking of evidence. So, okay, both the material is here, and the story also says, that's where these beings are, is in Australia. So that should be then that the material's there, and that's where we've identified this material. You also then should have, as I say, at that period, specifically, 780,000 years, specific evidence that is even the beginning of Homo sapiens. Now consider this, about a year ago, or 2 years ago, nobody on the planet would have put that date, right? Nobody on the planet would put that as the date. That's as simple as that. They would have told you, right, that Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans probably started diverging 300,000 years ago, maybe 400. Then it went to 500, right? So there's another thing you've got to consider. There's no way 10 years, 20 years ago, it's been moving and moving. That if you'd gone back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when they saw material in the books come out, no way. You'd be totally out there to be talking about things like 900,000. But even in our work, if I had tried to write this 2 years ago, I would have struggled a bit, because you'd be like, well, how does that mesh? They're saying, because I have to go on what the scientists are saying. I'm not a geneticist, right? So I have to look at what are they saying. If they're saying it happened 300,000 years ago, it's no good me saying, well, I found bits of a craft from 780,000 years ago and that they made people, because then you'll say, well, the scientists are saying that Homo sapiens start 300,000 years ago. You got a huge gap there, mate. Game over, right? So we're in a unique period where the genetic evidence is now saying, well, no, actually, it really does go that far back. And it really does mesh with these pieces, and it really does mesh with the time of that bombardment, and it really does mesh with the, the magnetic reversal. And that even like 2 years ago, that would not have added up. You would have said, no, like hominins, humans didn't start then. That's an important point to make. And then when you go into the genome, right, there's a couple of things, specific things to say, like, okay, has anyone meddled with us? The first thing you've got to look for, or the first thing that comes up, if you like, is the fusion of chromosome 2, right? Most people have probably heard, well, most people in your audience maybe have heard of the fusion of chromosome 2, right? It's one of the things that separates us from primates, from other primates, okay? That we have an end-to-end fusion, right, of 2 of our chromosomes. So instead of having 48 chromosomes, we have 46 chromosomes, right? Now, this is well known. It's been well known for quite a while. And some people have tried to use that as evidence suggesting maybe aliens did it. But like, it's a more complex argument than that, because chromosomes can fuse in nature. Right, wild horses and tame horses have a different number of chromosomes. Okay, so and they can obviously still interbreed and stuff. So it's not that in itself you'd say, okay, well, that's enough. Case closed. It's like, well, no. You have to then see, like, well, did anything come of that at that time that looks like it positively influenced our species, and also when did it happen? And like until now, nobody has really offered a date on that. I've seen people in alien like kind of circles saying, well, yeah, we think, that's when the Anunnaki modified humans, 450,000 years ago. And they've used it for that argument, right? You can't. And the reason I say this is because they have now understand that chromosome 2 fusion occurs also in Neanderthals and Denisovans, right? That immediately pushes it back. So it has to be, again, it's occurred in that shared ancestor. And we know that shared ancestor goes back to, at least in that period, 700,000 to 800,000 years ago. As I say, you can look at different dates, but one favored date is around 770, 780,000 years ago. So you're going to say that there's no way it can be 450,000 years ago. That's gone, right? That's gone. It has to be at the beginning of the divergence of these different humans. Now, that still opens it up to, well, was it then, or all the way back to when we diverged from the ancestors of chimpanzees, going back like 5 million years ago, because that was one theory, is maybe it fused then, and that's why our species came about, is because of this, separating us off from the other primates, which was a problem. But then I've managed to track down a scientist in the UK, who has looked at this, and he said, well, look, there is a way actually working out a kind of a close to maximal age. So you have to look at the way the genes at the end, the DNA at the end of these chromosomes would usually change when they're splitting and dividing, because they're no longer separate. They're kind of frozen in time at the time when they fused. So he's looked at it. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not a biologist. I'm not going to put this in the best way, perhaps, but he's looked to see when he feels that stopped happening. When it fused, when it stopped changing, because it's no longer at the ends where things can change. It's fused, and he's managed to track it down to, he said, somewhere close to 750,000 years ago. Right, knowing that it also has occurred at the beginning of Neanderthals and Denisovans, and knowing it must be close to 750,000, it can't go back millions of years. He's saying it's got to be close to that. We now see that it's got to be within that range again, towards 780 at the beginning. Whenever Denisovans, Neanderthals, and humans split, that's when it happened. That's anomalous in itself, right? Because you have this strange concordance with the divergence of multiple large-brained hominins at the time of this fusion, right? That's a starting point. And the fusion is happening at this time again, the same time that's come up on the other stuff. So we have that. And then you should look a bit deeper. What genes do you see changing? What's happening? Why is it that we don't have humans with 48 chromosomes, right, and a small population with 46 chromosomes, which you'd expect, right? Because if you just have this fusion, doesn't really do much, just happens to happen in one person, you'd expect it to happen in one person, and that then they breed with people, right, it would disappear. So even if you assume that 2 people had it, you would generally expect it to disappear, right? Because it goes into the background of all those other people, yeah? So that's why usually these anomalies just disappear. So the scientists say, well, look, there's 2 models where that might not happen. One model is where you have a very small population that is ancestral to all living humans, that is somewhere isolated and in small numbers, and so when this happens, it manages to spread throughout the population. Now, being in Australia, if it's a small population isolated in Australia, that would answer that, yeah, to one degree. But it still says, you still sort of expect there to be 2 populations, even if it doesn't just completely disappear. So unless, of course, there's some kind of radical benefits of the fusion that mean that the ones that carry it are so better equipped for life that they outcompete all other human forms on the planet, right? And that they go on to essentially take over the planet. So these are two scenarios where they can say, well, we could understand it. But the most likely of those is both. That you have a sudden fusion in a small population, which brings radical benefits, and somehow there's enough people in the same generation carrying the same fusion to interbreed and ensure that that population goes on to thrive. Now, that in itself is a fucking weird scenario, because you don't expect to suddenly have multiple breeding pairs carrying a rare, anomalous, positive gene fusion, right? And that they then go on to take over the whole planet. So even that in itself, scientists are a bit like, well, it's a head scratcher, you know. And then when you look closer, you find genes. Like, for example, I can't give you the name of the gene off the top of my head. Obviously, in the book. But there's one gene where they found that there's a fragment, right, which is like about 800 letters long, tiny fragment of a complete gene. They say it looks almost as if it's being cut out of a longer gene, replicated, and spliced back in. Actually, the word they used was, it looks almost Xeroxed. Like, when a scientist starts saying things like that, that's pretty freaking anomalous, because they're saying, you know, there's stuff in this gene, and that gene, is to do with the development of the neocortex, right? The most complex, newest part of the brain, which allows most of the connectivity. They also found that the FOXP2 gene, which is very much linked to language capabilities, that there is one of the mutations on the FOXP2 happens again just before the Neanderthal Denisovan divergence. They also carry the FOXP2, right? We have a later mutation, which means that we probably have an improved ability for language production, right, over Neanderthals and Denisovans. But they also carry the form that allows for the kind of connectivity that would produce language. And again, he looked at it and he said this earlier mutation is likely in the range of around maybe 1 million years ago, maybe. He said, but it seems to be happening around the time when all these strange changes in humans are happening, right? So we've got genes for language, genes for the neocortex. There's another gene which they say literally seems to come out of nowhere, straight out of the junk DNA, fully formed. And that allows us another boost of interconnectivity in the brain. I mean, there's a point you look at that, you think, what the fuck? You know, because this is precisely what we'd be looking for. If you want to see that someone is meddling around trying to upgrade a hominin, you know, that they've gone in, even the fusion's on the site of a gene which expresses itself in brains, reproduction, and our immune system, stuff like that, yeah, right into the middle of that. That's all weird, right? And now you have another problem, right? Because you've done this, it seems like a success story, but you have a problem, right? Because a rapidly growing brain requires a rapidly growing head, right? You can't just have a bigger brain, same size skull, okay? It doesn't work, does it? Don't work. It's a problem.
Well, you can't. It's just going to hurt a lot.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you've got to get through that same small birth canal, right? That yesterday's kids had to go through, which has evolved to just allow the head size for the average hominin, right? Now, that birth canal is no bigger tomorrow than it was yesterday. So how do you get these heads? They're going to be rapidly growing bigger over a few generations, right? How do you get them to start coming through? How are they born? You're going to have the highest mortality rate for your pregnant mothers. It's going to be insane. You're basically engineering in an extinction event because they can't be born. You're going to have kids dying in childbirth, taking their mothers with them, because you can't expect the birth canal just to keep up with this rapidly growing head size. So something really astonishing happens around this time, right, which answers this. This is, again, I say fingerprints to engineers and clever engineering. Is right around this time we have a sudden rapid increase in what's called neoteny. And neoteny is it's a word most of you haven't heard. I hadn't heard of it a year ago. Everyone should know what neoteny is because it's fundamental to what we are as human beings, right? It's the moving of infant traits further into adulthood, right? So, for example, a human baby is born as a fetus, right? We are not born as a full infant, yeah? We are born as a fetus. You can actually, you look at this, some things like the skull fusing hasn't even occurred, right? We can't even lift our own heads, let alone walk. You know, look at some of the animals. A horse is up in a couple of hours, could be running, right? Look how long it would take for a human baby to do that. Because something really clever has happened, right? We come out as a fetus, allowing our head to keep growing at a rapid pace without affecting the mother. So by stretching out childhood and that infancy, it allowed us to be born, but with the potential for our brain to come rapidly expanding, with no need for this weird extinction event to come up. And it brought a whole load of other things with it. Because when you have an elongated infancy, it requires a lot more parental interaction and a lot more support than when you have an animal that's born and can literally walk, feed itself. You change the social dynamics of the species, right? Because suddenly you need to have at least a partner who shares your view of keeping that baby alive for months and months or years. Is not going to be self-sufficient. A mother on her own trying to hunt and gather and look after a baby is in a lot of shit, especially in a time when, you've got one of the biggest, predatory cats in the world, like in Australia, and anywhere on the planet at that time, you've got some problem, like cave bears and all that shit. It's not a time when you really want to be a woman on your own holding a baby trying to get enough food to live, right? So you need at least a partner. That's still not really enough. So you start need to have your family group, complex social, behavior, social contracts where you share food. Essentially, by doing this, you're seeding the communal requirement and social behavior. So they're changing the dynamics of a wild species to a tamed, interconnected human species.
There's one
completely different dynamics.
There's one thing you may not have actually considered. The average species, and like I'm going to say, humans unfortunately tend to do this as well in certain extreme cases. If you've ever heard of parents or like a mother who's let's say drowned her kids, unfortunately, you see very similar behavior with cats. Let's say I've had a friend of mine who had a fairly large litter of kittens. They got all the kittens out, cleaned them off, he put them all in the box and put them away in the corner in the closet, and went out to the store to go get something, came back, and three of the kittens had been eaten apparently by the mother. So that happens the same thing with rats, happens the same thing with hamsters, up the line to primates. We have a very interesting propensity for all species on this planet to, whether there is an indication by the parent for whatever reason, or whether it's a, something that's inherent within evolution, that at some point there is always that. Sometimes people make very bad decisions, or cats do things that would shock us.
There's always an outlier in the trend. There's going to be those outside the trend, who don't want to, don't do the things the way the others do it.
Well, when my daughter was just about to be, or had just been born, I think it was about a month or so after her birth, and Laird Scranton, who's been probably a fantastic, one of the biggest influences as far as early fatherhood to me. He's also a fantastic writer. Somebody I've been reading since a kid, and he was telling me his experiences, because it was 2:00 in the morning, and I'm up, and Laird's a night owl, and he's just okay, so this is basically what happened, from my experience. He would essentially kind of give me an idea through parable of what I was going to be expecting, and most of it's come true. And the most interesting thing he said was that interesting thing about biology and evolution. Yes, it's okay, well, what is that, Laird? Kids, it's the babies are made to be as adorable as possible at the worst opportune time, so that we as humans just don't kill them because they've done something absolutely stupid, and they're just in that moment the most adorable things on the planet. And you look at kittens. Well, yeah, we have biological cues within ourselves, within that social dynamic, that because raising a child like that is very difficult. So the evolution or whatever it has brought us, has also encoded within us the ability to have that social dynamic, as well as have those cues, so that if something's going on, that we have a release of hormones which essentially stops some of our worser base animalistic or reptilian instincts that are still seen in some of the other species on the planet.
Yes.
So
we've reinforced those traits as well over in breeding choices. That when you're looking for a partner, obviously we've seen they can see that neoteny is favoured, right, in human evolution, because, for example, as you say, there's things we're drawn to. There's certain looks, expressions, like the face of a baby or a child. An adult man is more likely to feel protective over something happening to another human that looks like that, right? So we've tended to also choose partners that are more neotenous. There's things that we don't even realize we look for. That women are more neotenous than men. They look more childlike. They have features more typical of infants. That also means that women were looking for men who are drawn to preserve people with neotenous features, like children, but also women. So you can imagine over time, we have a feedback loop where, you know, it benefits the woman to find a man who is naturally feels protective of neotenous features, which the child has, and also the woman has. And also he's then, you know, then producing offspring that themselves are more neotenous and also have those traits, you know, that they are more likely to protect the child or the woman, you know. And so you do get these feedback loops where, you know, we may be very different, you know, to how we were like a million years ago. It may have been that there wasn't so much of that, you know, average care and concern for children, but that selectivity means you're more likely to get successful breeding and successful raising of the children if you get those features in, you know, in the guy and in the woman. So obviously, yeah, there's always going to be outliers that don't really get, but we've kind of over time, you know, been drawn to those people that are more likely to be like that. And part of that is the way they look. And like I said, these factors have produced what we are today, that we have people that are more neotenous. Like the Neanderthals are essentially not neotenous, right? If you took the main difference between us and Neanderthals seems to be a lack of neoteny, that they went off into the wild, right? They lived in we now know they lived in small groups, probably family groups. They didn't take much interest in complex social behavior. They may have traded and stuff. We don't know too much about that. There's some evidence of that. But basically, they lived rugged, outdoor lives, separated off into small groups. And what you find is they look less neotenous and more ape-like. They have the extended brow ridges, the bigger jaws. They have things that are more typical of other, like earlier primates and earlier ancestors. But it's not because they're somehow more primitive than us, right? It's because we have chosen a life that's more domestic, and domestication favors neotenous traits, whereas that outdoor wild kind of separated living actually has a physical expression which is less neotenous. It's kind of weird. So you can always say that Neanderthals are like the wild version of modern humans, and we're the tame version. And that we even see in animals that when you tame an animal, it starts to express its genes differently, and it will look different to the wild version. You know, a wild cat and a tame cat are very similar, but they do express differently, you know, and obviously the behavior is very different. So it's quite funny that, yeah, we can see that we've kind of become a self-taming version of the Neanderthals. It's kind of weird, but.
And to be able to play devil's advocate, if we're dealing with the scientific aspect, and you know, I can guarantee you there will be criticisms that may come up once this book is released from some experts who will say, okay, well, they're basing, you discussed previously to this. A lot of the recounts from either shamanic peoples having interactions with alien beings, or seeing alien beings materialize out of balls of light, and you're basing this off of scientific evidence that we currently have of or at least a possibility of understanding of the universe as it actually is, and at the same time you've also impressed upon what these aliens potentially could be based on scientific evidence, the opinions of experts who have said, well, this is a possibility that we've logically been able to decide. At the same time, we're still basing that evidence off of our own coloring from our own experiences from our own culture. Shit could be completely different out there. We could have bug creatures who could, you know, eat small rodents out of pots, or, you know, giant 7-foot-tall hominins with batleths that eat gach all the time. And yes, I pronounced that correctly, ladies.
But people are seeing all that, aren't they? Let's be honest.
Exactly.
All of that. I mean, so I don't think it's one size fits all.
Well, so the idea is that we have this one particular period that you're saying, well, we have some evidence of this potential craft based on a claim that was made from a book of 2002 that was derived from a channeling episode, or like a channeling incident or a series of channeling
memories and interaction with an object.
So we have that and you found scientific evidence of that. Anything else based on scientific evidence of saying this is possible? And when it comes to scientific research, personal accounts can be they're basically given the least amount of credibility because they're not reproducible. It's essentially saying if a shaman's saying, I saw a being come out of a ball of light that was 7 foot tall and blue, unless he actually has a body of a 7 foot tall alien or something to be able to say, hey, the 7 foot tall alien was there besides his own experience, the best anybody can say is cool story, bro. And we're at a point in time within our society, and the reason why there is a schism within ufology is because and I'm going to get in some trouble for this, but I don't give a shit. It's not the first time. There's a lot of UFO-tainment out there, and there's a shit ton of people who make tens of thousands of dollars off of books at conferences, who then also are speaking at these conferences, and they make several thousands of dollars off of that speaking engagement. And there's a lot of, I'm going to say a word that I've gotten from the inside, that most of it is basically, it's entertainment. It's not necessarily for information. So there are going to be people who are going to group you into that same group.
Well, I would ask the question, what do they want to see? Because, I mean, there's a point where what do they want to see? Well, because, I can't say that I've got a captured grey alien in a box. I'm not going to put that out there and say that, for the big surprise at the end, look, ta-da, here's Bonzo from Planet Rigel. I can't offer that. So, I mean, I am limited by what is left from something that long ago. I mean, I can't expect to go necessarily and just randomly dig around Australia and hope to find the remains of an alien from that craft. Even if it does exist, there isn't anything in that narrative that would let me find where that was. And I wouldn't expect it to remain after 700,000 years. So I mean, there is a limitation on what can be supplied. So all I can offer them is a coherent narrative, where you have a description of what is a complex contact event involving a great many people. Perhaps a vast number of people across the planet, right, who all have some kind of relation to this claim, So I say, okay, well, that's everyone knows about that. That's not new. There's something strange going on, right? What the cause of that, all the ins and outs of it, who knows? But we know that for thousands of years, people have claimed these interactions, paranormal, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's covered in the beginning. I say, but there also is a specific claim here that these beings... No, and it's out there also in that other stuff, but also, well, it can only come from, look, that claim could only come from the supernormal phenomena, okay? The claim that we were made by Homo sapiens, that Homo sapiens have an alien ancestry, right? That can only come as a claim from supernormal phenomena, because where else would it come from? So the first thing they have to say is, okay, well, if you want me to do this without the supernormal phenomena, there's no starting point. Right, because it's impossible. Because nobody alive in the last 6,000 years, where recordings have existed, nobody saw that happen, right? Because we know Homo sapiens came about 700,000 years ago. So, it's not going to be believable from hieroglyphs. It's not going to be believable from Sumerian scrolls. What some people say it is, they believe it, but they choose to believe it, right? There's no solid evidence in that. There is just some humans expressing their beliefs onto a scroll, saying that, we say aliens made us, we say that we were slaves, or even if it says that, that's arguable. So you have somebody's interpretation of somebody else's interpretation of possible speculative events, right? Now, most people have used that as a jump-off point, yeah? But I don't see that as any stronger in particular than the supernormal events, because all you can say is, well, we have a scroll. Yeah, okay, great, but, do we know the guy that wrote it, why he wrote it, what he really saw, what he wanted to get across to us, or if he even wanted us to see it, whether it was a joke narrative, or, there's a lot of problems with that. And that's why scientists don't take seriously things like the Sumerians said aliens came, right, for that reason. Because what you don't find, right, is engravings of the spaceships, yeah? What you don't find is all of the pieces of their culture, right? You don't even find old broken toasters or metal forks, or, there is no sign of an advanced technological civilization anywhere on the planet, right, before 6,000 years ago or so. You've got some megaliths and stuff, but you don't go out and do archaeology and find things like a metal fork and a nicely done china plate even, right? Let alone pieces of bicycles and toasters. And, we're not finding the signs of any past advanced civilization. People will say, oh, but what about OO parts? And when you look at those OO parts, most of them, they don't stand up to a strong analysis. You'll say oh, there's a piece of coal with a bit of metal in it. Who found it? How was it found? What was the scientist that analysed it? Was it definitely found, objectively, or did someone just put it in a piece of coal? And those things crumble really quickly, right? So I'm saying that I've seen no evidence of an advanced technological civilization between about 6,000 years ago and this event 700,000 years ago. I don't see anything else, right? I'm not saying it didn't happen. If it did, though, it had the best cleanup crew in the universe, because we are not seeing any of that. So because there is no other jump off point, you either go with what the Sumerians, the Mayans, the Cree, all these people are saying about there's an alien connection, and you just say, well, we'll take it on faith that thousands and thousands and thousands of humans are not just making this shit up. That there's a reason why you can go to cultures all around the planet and they'll say, like, our ancestors came from the Pleiades, or there was a gate hole to the Pleiades. So you either look at that and say, well, why the fuck are they saying it? Why are all of these groups saying it? Okay, it's not proof, but you can use that as a jump off point and say, well, now let's look for some sort of evidence that they came within historical period. Now, that's what most people have done. They've gone looking at pyramids, and they've gone looking at scrolls, and, they've done their best to find some objective proof of aliens. Now, is there any? I mean, you keep an eye on it. I mean, has anyone really come up trumps with that? I mean, well, I don't think that they have.
Well, I think there was, again, the only one would have been that piece of aluminum, which is apparently from the leg of a spacecraft, but I'm pretty sure that we debunked, all of the U parts we actually debunked, or at least you debunked them. It was either in the conversation leading up to it, or I think it might have been on the phone when I was at the computer store, or it may have actually been afterwards. But I know sometime within that period, we did discuss extensively the U parts, and I know that when it came to, I know Brams brought up the London hammer, which I know you discussed as being fast-forming, limestone-like rock, which essentially encased the hammer, and it wasn't that old. And it could have just been dropped there and formed over the period of a couple of years.
That's right. It was explainable.
So, for a lot of things like that, I can understand. For many of the other U-parts that are out there, some of them may actually just lead to ancient civilizations. One of Klaus Donner's first...
But again, that's problematic, Chris, because where is all the debris and the detritus from those advanced civilizations? It's not believable anymore. And that's why the archaeologists say that we're all pseudo-archaeologists and that we're just making things up. The reason is they say, look, no matter where we dig and how deep we dig, what we find is stone tools, right? Not bits of bicycles, not bits of toasters, not bits of, the car, not bits of... there is literally not a scrap coming up from the holes in the ground. So, that's a big problem, because look at us today as an advanced technological civilization. Look how much crap that we produce is everywhere. There's bits of plastic everywhere, microplastics. The sea has got nearly as much plastic as fish, right? There is the upper atmosphere is full of swirling bits of crap, right? You can't dig in the ground without finding old crisp packets and stuff, right? It's a problem to then say there was an equally highly advanced civilization on this planet 12,000 years ago or so, right? Because there's not a scrap of it. Not one piece of junk, right? We're not finding it, Chris. And this is a problem. For years, most of my life, I said to you, I think there was a really advanced civilization. I think there was a spiritually advanced and a very sensible civilization 12,000 years ago that was global. I don't believe it had any of those things that we consider to be highly technological in that way. They may even known about how to use solar energies, reflecting them on the pyramids. And stuff. There may be some elements of that, and consciousness-related activities where they knew how to access information. And so, advanced like that. But we're not finding old train tracks and stuff. We're not finding bus mobile phones. At some point, we have to sort of say, look, we are not finding the evidence for that. So either we have to explain it in an extraordinary way, that the aliens came and cleaned up all the debris. Maybe they did. I mean, if they can alter the fabric of reality. But as you've said, why should we believe that? That's an extraordinary solution to a really mundane problem. Because the mundane solution would be that there wasn't that civilization, and therefore it doesn't require an alien cleanup crew or the background nature of reality to change, and these extraordinary solutions. So the same people might say, well, I believe in an ancient civilization, but I don't believe in aliens. Well, I can tell you, your thing is based on just as much shit as the alien people saying it. Because unless you can pull out a bit of broken toaster from 6 foot down in the ground, tell me there was a fucking civilization just like ours, then you're full of shit, mate. Because you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, he's a liar. That guy, the ufologist guy's a fucking liar. He's got no proof. But I believe there was an ancient civilization that had railroads and cars and airplanes. And yeah, mate. Okay, show me your fucking... show the cards, mate. Come on, bro. Show your cards. Because I don't think you've got more than the ufologist in this. It just sounds more reasonable on face of it. So maybe there was just about, but the maybes again, maybe there was a grey alien in a base, in the earth. But I don't see him. I've got no access. I've got no special secret access. I can't see it. Right. So we are very limited. I don't think that there's any good proof for an advanced human civilization anytime before 6,000 years ago, right? There is no good evidence of it. They may have had extraordinary understandings of space, of reality. They may have had consciousness abilities. They may have lived in harmony with the planet and done things that were extraordinarily intelligent, because we're very stupid as a culture. So when we talk about highly advanced civilization, what we might be talking about is a really intelligent civilization that didn't do the things we're doing. It didn't fill the seas with crisp packets, right? It didn't have bits of junk everywhere. It actually found a way to live for a very long time without fucking everything up, mostly getting on with each other, not killing each other all the time, and enslaving other people to make your junk, right? That they were intelligent in a way that we don't consider to be intelligent. We consider it to be backwards, right? Because they lasted a very long time, happily, not working 9 to 5, doing shit they hated, for crap they don't want, and filling their seas with junk, right? That, to me, was an advanced civilization. Yes, I think there was an advanced civilization on this planet, but not a high-tech advanced civilization. And I think that's where people have gone really wrong. There is no evidence of that high-tech. And in fact, it may be that high-tech always leads to planetary destruction. We don't know. It may be that a lot of the, AI, whatever, that we become AI, because in the end you have to transition, because you've ruined your planet so much. It may be that some beings out there didn't want to be advanced AI, but there's a point where, like, what do we do? We've so fucked up our planet with all our advanced technology that the only thing we can do now is hide in some computer networks as like discarnate consciousness. Like, that may be a frightening reality of where you go with high tech, especially if you're not careful. And like, are we going to say that we're so much more intelligent than, say, the Egyptians, who lasted thousands of years, right, doing what they did without doing too much more progress? In a way, they didn't get that much more high tech. They did some clever stuff. Yeah, but they weren't flying airplanes. Right? People can say, oh, well, there's one carving in one temple. It looks a bit like a helicopter. Yeah, but we know it ain't a helicopter for 2 reasons. One, the stucco fell off. And if you put it back on, it actually shows, it makes, someone else wrote over someone else's name. And like when you put the two bits together, yeah, you can see how it happened. Second thing is, I think they're going to mention that helicopter more than fucking once, right? Like, you've built helicopters, bro, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. Like, aren't you going to be excited? Like, man, look, come see. I've got an Apache gunship. I'm the first one on the planet. I built it somehow out of stones. And I didn't really have a lot. I didn't have a factory or anything. But I built this Apache gunship. I was flying around it. It's going to be a legend, isn't it? The legend of the man with an Apache gunship. That is going to be written down in every temple in Egypt. They're going to carve that other shit off. That's crap. Remember that guy who had the Apache gunship? I think we've got to start putting human thinking into these things. And too often people don't. They say, oh, well, no, maybe it's because of what? Why couldn't they talk about it? They had a giant conspiracy where they only allowed to carve it in one corner of one temple, where they couldn't talk about their advanced technologies. Who was telling them they couldn't? We always put these things on excuses for why there's no evidence. We make the excuses in the present. In those times, we have no reason to assume that if they had advanced tech, they wouldn't be allowed to talk about it. Why not? We talk about it. We write vast volumes about it.
I think there was actually one fair, and I'm trying to remember if it was who it was specifically, that there, even back then, there was a legend of great technology, or at least great something, magic from the pyramids, and this pharaoh had actually gone in and brought these things out. And I'm trying to remember exactly who it was from the past. Excuse me, if anybody can provide that from the YouTube chat who may remember the specific pharaoh. I know it may have been Akhenaten. I'm not too sure. I'll hopefully be able to upgrade the notes on this if I do find out. But I do remember it specifically. There was one that did go in to retrieve this technology. But again, this is something that I'm remembering from possibly somewhere else. So I could be completely wrong and just full of shit at this point on that particular point. But
no, I think there's references to very advanced understandings and stuff in history, and obviously talk about the possibility that they had contacts with advanced group of some sort, whether Earth-based or not Earth-based. But what we don't really see is the evidence that, and that they had certainly advanced understandings, like you've covered. Obviously, the pyramid is a complex technology, and like I know you've covered before, obviously it seems to be able to do things in harmony with the Earth's energies, and I think it also seems to utilize some of these Schumann frequencies, and it does all sorts of amazing things. But what it doesn't have is wiring and capacitors. So we're talking about a very different kind of understanding of what we've said technology, or utilizing energies that exist. It even has a concave outer surface that would have been covered in limestone. It's likely that it reflected or refracted light for some purpose. So again, these are technologies, and you can arguably say they're kind of high tech, but they're not the kind that we're going to find, capacitors and bits of, it's obviously a very different kind of technology, and it is still a stone technology. So, you sort of have to put it in there as very clever Stone Age technology, because there is only stone evidence for it, Well, that's not to say it's not clever.
Well, if you believe Baval and his last book, and again, if you've watched the episodes with Baval that we had on here, he's claiming that at least there's a possibility that the pyramid itself, and I know we're getting way off topic, but still, it kind of fits into that same idea. That the pyramid was either a blueprint or like a 3D printed blueprint for a very much more complex machine, which we didn't have the technology then to build, to do something. And there's a very good possibility that it could have been something that could either could or was meant to say, hey, you got to figure out how to do this, and here's how we did it here using our tools and our technology to essentially send somebody's essence, somebody's soul, somebody's consciousness to a particular point in Orion's belt.
Yeah, but isn't that a problem in itself? Because all of this, with the Egyptians, say that we're getting this information from off-world star gods. So you're back around.
The Dogon said the same thing. Evidence that Scarabray says the exact same thing. Laird Scranton's, and both of them will deny that their work is connected in any way, shape, or form, and I've told them flat out both. It's like, listen, I've interviewed you on this, you said da-da-da-da-da. Interviewed you on this, and you said ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. What you're saying correlates with what he's saying. Laird's work is essentially saying the very similar idea of interdimensionality, the idea of people coming through portals to teach and instruct, and it happens over a period of time. They will take people from particular groups and they will sequester them and say, okay, we're going to give you this information. And it's happened with the Dogon. It's potentially happened with, the people at Scarabray, who could have been from goodness knows where. We'll go back to Tepe, for instance. So
that's the problem. Therein lies the problem, Chris. Because you're back at your original question. Like, how do we do this without all that super weirdness? You can't, because every time we look at the evidence, even if the highest technologies that ever existed in the past, and we ask, well, how did they get there? And all the records say, well, extraterrestrial beings told us, or intradimensional beings. It's technically still extraterrestrial. They're not on our physical world. So however you look at this, you end up back at a conundrum. How do we accept this without accepting the supernatural side? You can't.
Well, you can't.
Don't buy the book. If you're not open-minded to the supernatural, don't buy the book. Don't look into the subject. Don't waste your time, because you will always end up back at the intradimensional extraterrestrial problem.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that how do you differentiate between what is a real legend or folklore versus something that, like maybe the shaman just ate the wrong kind of mushroom and just got really fucked up one night. And it's like, man, the shit was coming out of the sky. I swear to God. Like, how many do you have? 5 caps? Get him some water and put him to bed. He's fine. How do you differentiate between those two things?
Well, I mean, experientially is one thing. I mean, obviously, Danny has more experiences with that than I do. But in terms of the evidence, I mean, really, there's only two ways. And the information has to either be useful and be able to be applied to something, and it actually has a use, right? Or secondly, you have to find objective evidence, like pieces of the ship they talked about, like the changes in the DNA they've talked about. That's what I'm doing in the book. I'm not going to say that I can just cut off all the super weirdness. I can't. But what I've said is, well, there should be objective physical matching evidence that matches the story that is told in the supernatural, right? So if you don't have that, then it makes it, like you say, how do you know if it's genuine or not? You can't say it's rubbish, but you also can't say that it's well supported. So the best you can hope to do is what I've done, right? Which is where you then say, well, this is the information. I didn't get it. I didn't get a download. It's in someone else's book. I'm being objective because it's not my work. I'm not saying I wrote a book and then I'm going to prove it because someone laughed about it or something. Someone else had that out there for like 20 years or whatever. And then I've looked at how they've got it, and I thought it's really complex. The narrative seems coherent. And there's events in there which should leave some evidence. Now, if I'd found no evidence at all, Chris, there wouldn't be a book to talk about. No. That would be as simple as that. I would say, look, I've gone through it. There's no signs that humans were modified. There's no bits of a ship. this meteorite bombardment didn't happen. I just thought, it's a waste of my time, isn't it?
Well,
So a waste of my time. I'll carry on writing my next Into America book, and I would just be in this. And that's it. So I think you have to choose one of those two objective things. Either the information has an objective use and was used and it did something useful, like building a pyramid or whatever to do stuff, or they gave you information and although it doesn't in itself is useful, you can go away and find objective evidence that means something to you.
Yeah.
Now, Daniella,
that's my criteria.
Now, Daniella, I know that you're very, we said right at pretty much at the beginning, and it was probably right before we got on the air that you said you're a very shy person, and I can understand that. So I want to know from you who the work is based on and from your own experiences, which inspired the start of your husband's research to get this entire thing going. From when that happened, and you said it lasted about a year.
Yeah.
What experiences have you had, whether in dream format or has anything happened since the start of the work on the book? And anything to be able to say you're on the right track, correct here, or something that has told you any extra information, or has it been that was the situation that happened? I had the experiences over that period of time, and it's been nothing.
Okay, well, we've had, for example, Bruce did mention about the underground water network in the tunnels underneath the Mayan cities. Mm-hmm. Just recently there was something on Egypt about underground, what was it? And I had mentioned that already during that time. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, in terms of supernormal things, you haven't any sort of mentioned into the ET type stuff since then? Or... we've had things that have kind of shown up, proofs of things that she's experienced, but I'm not sure. You've had things where you've had the couple of dreams where Pleiadians appeared, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then experiences where you felt like you almost were going to go, and then it didn't. You've tried to stop it.
Yeah, I've had. They've tried to sort of take me back to that same place and start it up again. I've been really resistant to that happening, and I've told Bruce on a few occasions I feel like it's going to start again. I had something in January, where I was told by Hannah Pakal, who was the leader of the city at that time, in 7th century Palenque. He said, "We're not finished with you." I'm like, Bruce, I feel like something's going to happen. Just little bits and pieces that have been happening, and just really from the information. Well, obviously it's not all in the book. Probably we're going to have to write another book just basically specific to that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Because things that were told to me then are things that are happening now, things that are being discovered. And basically it was just that thing inside me. It was like, okay, it's finally time to get it out, because I really didn't want to speak too much about it. I wasn't prepared back then. It really it was daunting. It was harrowing. It was tiring. It changed me as a person. My personality changed. The way I sort of behave around people changed. So physically for me, it was something that I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I didn't call for it to happen. I sort of blame Bruce in a way.
I sort of did ask for it to happen.
It's always the husband's fault.
Things like that.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely. In this case, because had I probably not have connected with him physically, it may not have happened at all. So let's put it back to that. There's been bits and pieces. A lot of time has gone past, and I've kept very quiet about it. I don't like to speak too much about it. But then it was just something that prompted me. I said, Bruce, can you put what you're doing on hold? I think it's time to talk about it. And then, do this book. And then probably we're going to have to go back to that 7th century Palenque in Mexico and just get all that information out. Yeah, so we'll validate a lot of things that are happening at this point.
And it will also debunk a lot of things that are happening at this point. That's the other point, is that, like you said, there's a lot of stories out there where people are saying, aliens came and did this, aliens came and did that, or they're doing this. And I think one benefit of this, even if someone says, well, I don't think you've got absolute proof, which are very few things in science and in reality have absolute proof. I'll start by saying that.
Life in general.
If you're looking for absolute, solid, 100% proof of something, that's really hard. That's a target, especially in archaeology and anthropology. So that when you involve humans in something, it's really hard to say you've got 100% proof of what they did or what they were doing. However, what you can see in this work is that people should have a higher standard of, if you say that their craft exploded or landed or whatever, that if they don't have a piece of it, there should be something. If you got a piece or if it's something, and if you say, okay, aliens modified us 400,000 years ago, is there something that happens in the genome 400,000 years ago where you can say Well, yeah, I mean, at least it matches the time, of the story. Or, you say if they claim that there was a nuclear bomb went off, in the Middle East, that you can find the crater for that nuclear bomb, or, you know what I mean? That I think that we have to at least, what I'll be at least calling for in that work is that, yes, you can talk about the weird stuff, that's fine, that's part of the phenomena, but, try and raise the game to where, there's actually evidence. And also people will be able to look and see, because there's a lot of claims about when humans arose. And that's a big one in the whole subject. I've seen wildly different dates in all different places. But, I think people will be able to read it and they'll see that, well, no, Homo sapiens really go back to that period around 800,000 years ago, between 7 to 800,000 years ago. There's no sort of getting away from that, because that's when we're diverging with Neanderthals and Denisovans, who seem to be equally intelligent humans to us. They went off and they had artistic expression and communication and social structure. So we can't sort of say that they were kind of subhuman retards or so. Whatever happened that made us special made them special. Put it that way. So this story has to go back at least to there. So it's a debunking in a way as well, because any stories that claim humans have been made more recently than that Homo sapiens start more recently than that, they have to up their game, because where is your genetic evidence? What genes changed? Was there a fusion event? Was there something tangible in the genome where you can say aliens did that, or at least probably did that? Because I'm saying that so far nobody seems to offer that. I just hear people saying, yeah, they made us as slaves. Show me the genes that changed when they arrived, right? Because if you can't show me that, I don't believe you, right? Show me some evidence. If they were here, if their beings were here for 200,000 years running a society, show me the plates they used or something, or some bit of a toaster. I don't believe you, right? We've got to raise the game a bit higher. Now, not everyone will come away from reading my book believing me, right, and saying that I'll accept this is strong enough. But I think they will at least say, well, shit, he brings more to the table than most people.
It'll get people starting to think in a different way, because it's very easy to put information out there and do channeling. And I've seen a lot of people on Facebook doing live, videos. And I'm looking at Bruce thinking, what the hell's going on? Yeah. What is that crap? It's just they're talking about
narratives.
They're talking for hours about nothing, giving you nothing, saying nothing, and people are following them blindly, not asking the right questions.
The summary would be, innit? The aliens love us. They're watching us.
It's like,
bye-bye.
And
see you next week.
What else are you bringing to the table? So I mean, and yes, going back to that question that you asked me just now, one thing that I found that I did change is that the way I work with my psychic work and with my readings and with all the stuff that I do based on that, it did change, because it went from being intuition to being a form of knowing. So the information was there and I just had to access it. That's what changed the way I see things, the way I think. And then obviously the mediumship just became almost like a remote viewing. So everything from that point, from 2012 onwards, the way I was doing my work, psychically and intuitively, it changed. The dynamic changed, and it was like I was able to access things differently and give people information that normally another person that was doing the same kind of work as me couldn't do, because I would give you the fine details, I would give you the dates, I would give you the times, I would give you the names and other things. So it was like things that are physically impossible to tell somebody.
Because mediumship is a good example. Really, the whole point of spiritual mediumship, right, from the beginning when it became a thing, was the idea was to produce evidence, right, that people survive death.
Yeah.
Okay. So people should be giving people information that was privileged, in some way where you can't reasonably know it, and giving it to someone. So I mean, it's a similar kind of thing. If Danny's just saying, I'm a channel and I can tell you aliens love you and they're watching you and stuff, they might be telling her that, but where's the bit where you can say, aha, she just said something she couldn't know, that's probably channeling. A lot of time there's nothing in it like that. Mediumship's a bit different, because you have to be able to tell them, innit? Something your granddad looked like this, or his name was that, or you're holding a watch right now that your granddad owned, or something like that, where you're like, aha, now I think that she's not just making this crap up. Because otherwise you are left like that. And I think that's where in the super normal that, you are looking for those aha things where something validates. And again, I know I'm going back with the book, but it's similar. That if you get the transmission of weirdness, that's fine. But it should be that you can validate at least some details, right? Because if you get a transmission and we just say your granddad was in the army. How many people have granddads that are in the army and say World War II and stuff?
60%, 70%.
Yeah, but if you can say that your granddad, he smoked a pipe, he had a best mate called Bob, and you've got to get checked out. I think you've got a cancer in your leg, and you're having a leg problem. There's things that should be able to stack up where you can say, well, at least I can go and check that and find something in it which they couldn't reasonably know by Google searching me or going on Facebook or whatever. And then that is what mediumship's all about, is offering you evidence of survival of the spirit, not just telling you stories.
And I have had cases where I'm speaking to somebody and I'm tuned in and I'm really concentrating, and I get shown a picture and how many people are in the photo and that their names were such, and that they're there's a car behind them, and it was like this and it was like that, and the picture's black and white, and it was taken in 1945 or whatever. You've got to give people things that they can go away with and say, right, she's on track, we're tuned in. And that's, I think, part of becoming interdimensional, because you're going back and forwards and you don't even know it. Do you know what I mean?
And that's how the research with that phenomena works, Chris. In my view, it will never not be a weird subject area, right? Like aliens, past lives. It's weird, right? I'm not going to start pretending, it's just the same as being at work 9 to 5. It's kind of weird.
Yeah,
you should be able to validate some parts of it. It shouldn't just be relied on your open-minded faith in that I'm not a liar. Because, who knows? I mean, a lot of people they seem really honest. And then years later, people find out, they were making up like 99% of it. Even scientists, we know this, that people have built careers on made-up artifacts that they made themselves. There's one came out recently. And, esteemed scientists, So we can't just say, well, he's really qualified, or he speaks a good game, because if you can't produce something that really supports it, we have to be very careful of the cult of personality.
Yeah.
Because the cult of personality has pretty much always misled humanity. We've always, look at the leaders we have now. Are we a species that it can be trusted to pick out the best and put them to the top?
No.
No. I think not. Right, so we know that we're not, as a species, the best at doing that.
We're not doing well.
Okay, paranormal has Space Jesus, and the real world has an orange Oompa Loompa. That gives you a good...
We're not doing well.
No.
And so we're not doing well in that. So we have to raise the game of critical thinking in that way.
Yeah, we have to be very careful with the
very
information.
Careful. Not just say, I believe...
It's this because it is. No, it's not. You've got to say why.
We're nice people. You could say that, just believe us because we're nice people and we're friendly and we seem quite honest. But it's not enough. So, if I just told you I believe that story I read in a book and you should believe it too, then you should say, what the fuck? Why is he even bothering? I'll just buy the other book and see if I can believe that. You know what I mean? And just, why bother? So that's what I've brought to it objective, tangible evidence that supports the story, but doesn't necessarily absolutely prove it beyond any doubt, where every skeptic in the whole world will accept it. There will always be a way to challenge it, because I can see people who've reasonably challenged whether the sun is hot inside, right? You look at the electric universe, people will tell you that it's actually probably empty, and that it's a plasma phenomena with the heat on the surface. And it's not, you think about it, actually not totally unreasonable. You look at some of their arguments. So things that we would take for absolute, fixed, that the sun is hottest at the core, and all that, someone could turn and say, I don't believe you, and because there's this evidence here, and actually it seems like it's hotter, which is true, hotter beyond the surface in the heliosphere. Why isn't it hotter inside? Why is it black in the holes, suggesting it's cooler inside? Now that's a fucking weird problem, and that's something that everyone's what? What do you mean it's cooler inside the sun? Yeah, it's cooler. Those black spots, they're cooler. So what the fuck is that about? So there's things we take for absolute certain, fixed, that someone else will turn around and say to you, well, it's not proven. It's not absolute, but we haven't sent a satellite into the core of the sun and measured it, mate. So, the standard of what is proven is really fucking high. It's up, beyond the screen up there, right? So there's in science itself, there's certain areas where you can prove things beyond any reasonable doubt. And there's other areas where it's really hard, particularly when you're working with two sets of physics, right? The physics of the physical objective universe and the physics of quantum phenomena.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't mesh completely. Right, so we have a problem. So, we can have a model that looks perfect and works perfectly well in one of those levels of science, right? But falls into crumbling pieces of crap when you apply it to the other one, right? Now, that is a problem. So we don't really understand the workings of reality, okay? So if anyone says, well, it sounds weird, read what the quantum physicists are saying and see how weird they think it is. Because like they said, the top scientists say, look, anyone who says they understand the quantum nature of reality doesn't understand quantum physics, right? And that's our leading minds telling us nobody understands this stuff, right? It's so weird at the moment. that we're just trying to model it with maths and stuff and try to understand what the hell is going on in the very fabric of our reality, right? Where there's 0.0001% physical mass. The rest of it is empty. So we're essentially empty space. But we focus on the 0.0000001%, which is the physical objective, right? Now, isn't that a retarded start for a science anyway? That you take the smallest possible component of your reality and you make that the absolute focal point of importance, right? If you were a sensible civilization, maybe one of these other ones, maybe they didn't. Maybe they said, well, let's look at the other, like 99.99999, and maybe that's why they can go through wormholes and teleport, because they haven't focused on this tiny, almost insignificant percentage of reality that we've built everything around and said, well, that's the objective reality. And they probably said, well, yeah, good luck with that. You're never getting off your planet focusing on that crap because, you know, we're just going tunneling straight through the time-space continuum and doing stuff that you can't even fathom because you're so behind on understanding the very fabric of your reality. You're still calling it paranormal, like as though it's somehow beyond the normal to do these things.
Yeah.
As long as you have the idea that there's anything paranormal in existence, then you just don't get it, because paranormal means beyond normal. Nothing abnormal can happen, right? Everything that really genuinely happens is normal phenomena. It's weird sounding, but it's normal phenomena. Yeah, because nothing can be beyond the normal reality, okay? So anyone out there thinks, oh, it's somehow different, there's this paranormal. No. There is phenomena that's part of a reality in which quantum phenomena is able to do all these things. And we should expect things like teleportation to work. And they do. They're teleporting molecules. We should expect entanglement. Oh, it is. It's entangled objects. So look, one of the problems is the education level of people in general. They're not familiar with the science, right? They don't realize that the things that sound extraordinarily weird are not exactly extraordinarily weird. They are in a way, because to experience them is still extraordinarily weird. But in terms of what the fabric of our reality does, with it, you know, changing depending if we're looking at it or not, and things like that, you know, like seemingly to be essentially conscious and interactive, right? Then you have a real fundamental problem if you say, well, let's just take all the weird stuff out, that 99.99999% of reality, just ignore it, and we'll focus on that little tiny, you know, bit that we call physical. So those people I'm not going to try and convince, right? There's no hope. I'll put it this way. For me, there's no hope with those people. The book's not aimed at them. I'd ask them, please not to bother buying it. Don't waste your time, because it's not just about, you know, nuts and bolts and physical. So the best thing for those people is don't even buy it. But if you're interested in having that looked at in concordance with some physical objective evidence, which helps support that narrative, then yes, take a look at it. And also if the people are just totally open-minded and blah, 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 believe everything, read it and take it as a call for better evidence in those other categories where you're currently not getting any evidence. And that's where I'd put our book. It's firmly in the middle of the road. It's not a science textbook and it's not a channeling book. You know, it's going to offer you a bit of the weird stuff and some of the objective reality fused together into a narrative which, you know, I stand by. At the moment, I would say that, you know, the evidence has come together in such a way that I'm personally convinced that it's strong enough to say that there was a visitation, there was meddling, and that there's an ongoing contact underway. That's my stance. But I'm not going to say that everyone will come out of it and totally agree.
Yeah, and that's probably the most that's pretty well the best part to be able to end the show, as we've got about 5 minutes left on the Spreaker for tonight, and we could probably go all night, but if I've got it's like I've got a long drive tomorrow to Prince Edward County, so it's I know.
No worries.
Oh my goodness, and I want to make sure that at least people will go and get the book, read it, make your own minds up. If there are claims towards evidence, and there is evidence that is being presented in the book, do your research, do your due diligence, use your common sense, use your critical thinking, and come to your own conclusion on it. Don't dismiss it outright. Do not conclude on it, or outright. And the most important thing is to keep your rational minds and your wits about you, and enjoy at least the fantastic narrative. Because I know with Bruce, he's going to paint a good picture of, you know, a possibility. It may not be the possibility, but it's probably a damn good one and a fantastic read. So that's let me see if I can get the iPad.
Obviously, people can check out the websites and.
Yes, well, while I'm queuing up the music to close out the show, if you want to be able to give the people at home an idea of where they can get information on the book as time goes on. Or at least
sure, the main website for the book is hybridhumans.net. And also we have our own personal websites. If you're interested, I have brucefenton.info and daniella.cardenas.com, which is so obviously for intuitive stuff, and my other one's got my own book projects and stuff on it. But yeah, hybridhumans.net is the main one. And people interested in archaeological stuff, I also have ancientnews.net. So people want to look at any stuff on there, I have a magazine there. So any of those websites, they kind of follow us through. And obviously Facebook, if they look for Hybrid Humans, they will find a page for that as well on there. And follow us through there. And I'm open to questions, comments, criticisms on those pages. So people can ask me, what about this, what about that? Particularly on the Facebook kind of page, it's a good place if people want to start, feeding back a bit, saying what they find compelling or not, as it goes along. That'd be very welcome. Also, New Dawn magazine has an article by us. Yeah, it's out. People want to grab their copy of this edition of New Dawn, which I don't know. I think we've got it ahead of other people. But it's a kind of special on, UFOs, aliens, and stuff this month. So there's an article by us in New Dawn, so you can grab that. I imagine now or in the next few days, that'll introduce you to the subject. Any of those places, and obviously they can buy the other book, which is out. And I will clarify quickly, Chris. I say, look, there's just obviously the book we've used. We haven't gone away and tried to prove every single thing in there, and there's a lot of strange stuff. We've picked out the things that, as I say, I felt should leave objective signatures where I could go away and prove it. I can't say that everything in this book's true, and I can't say that even each person that gave the author information was equally truthful, because you're talking about 20 to 30 people that gave her information. Now, so there may be some things that she was told which are not completely accurate. You know what I mean? So we have to give some leeway that, I can't say that I've proven it all, and I don't know these people, right? I've only gone away and proven what I felt should have had objective evidence.
And that's the best way to be able to put it from the man himself. I can't even clarify on that. That's amazing. That's the perfect way to be able to say it. Ladies and gentlemen, next week on the show, we've got none other than Miss Laura London returning into the Den of Lore. We're going to be discussing on the show archetypes and the hidden ego. Talking with somebody who has a Jungian training and who has been interviewing the best on Speaking of Jung. Go back and watch other episodes. This will be a lot more organized, and I swear Tyson will not knock the camera over this time. So thank you very much for joining us, and I wish you all a good night. Oh, and hail Coco.